appointments report.
Thank you. So the first item that I have the privilege of bringing to you this evening is actually covered in your consent agenda, and I would ask that you, you can vote it up first. It's usually voted first on the agenda. I'm not certain if whether you make a motion to move it up in the agenda or it's likely properly noticed for the vote anyway. Is the administrator appointments. I'll take the first one for the pupil personnel director. I make a recommendation in accordance with administrator and exempt evaluation salary and benefits policy 5325 to appoint Bretta Combs into a 3-year contract for the pupil personnel director.
Is there a motion?
I'm sorry, could you just say who moved it?
I did. JC. And Kate, did you second it? Michelle did. Okay. Is there any discussion?
I don't have an issue with the appointment. I just wonder about the process, just because I'm not familiar. Would this typically be on both of them? I was just wondering the same question. Would this typically be something that would be advertised and go out to the entire group or not?
When I turn my microphone on, other people have to turn them off or we're going to get that hum. So that's why I wanted to take them separately. So for Bretta, I can tell you the background. Either a year or two ago, I think you were on the school committee at the time, Kate and Michelle, we brought forward a proposal for a sustainability plan for Bretta so that she could, in the eventuality of Teresa Egan's retirement or resignation at some point, so that she could learn alongside Teresa Egan. And then what you would be doing is endorsing a commitment that a former body of school committee members made to Bretta so that she could grow in her role, learn alongside Teresa, and she's just the best person I can possibly think of, and I know so many people throughout the state of Rhode Island that could do this role for us. So no, it was not advertised. It was not. There was no interview for this. This is my recommendation is based upon a sustainability plan that's been in the works for more than a year's time.
Okay, so in terms of the process, when this originally was, the decision was originally made, we are simply carrying forward what that plan was. If this was something that was not anticipated, then you either would have come to, if it was unanticipated retirement,
then we would have advertised. Correct.
So for this decision, it's simply that this body is carrying out what the intended plan was because we knew Teresa Egan was retiring. And so therefore, Bretta was trained for her position, and we are simply voting on implementing or finishing the implementation of the plan.
So a sustainability plan is put into place when there is somebody in an assistant position. So, for example, I was in a sustainability plan in a former district that I worked in. If and when the superintendent ever resigned or retired, they didn't want to lose me, so they put me into a sustainability plan and voted for that.
That makes sense.
That's not always done. It's to my knowledge, I've never recommended it being done here, but I've also never had a candidate who so smoothly and effortlessly could make the transition.
That makes 100% sense. That the reason that it wasn't advertised is because Teresa had planned her retirement well over a year ago. Therefore, Bretta was groomed.
I can't speak to when Teresa planned her retirement, but whenever
this has been a plan for Bretta to take over so that there would be a smooth transition. So that makes sense.
Correct. And so you have the right to reject it, support it. By law, I make the recommendation, but it is your decision in terms of what you do.
I feel very comfortable. I just wanted the background on it. Thank you.
I just wanted to say I think South Kingstown's super fortunate to have Bretta serve as the pupil personnel director, so I'm kind of excited about this appointment, and I think it's definitely a good move. I plan to support it.
Thank you.
My only question is on the recommended contract length. Is it typical to start the clock over on a brand-new 3-year contract? Like, where does, if it's a transfer within the school department, is it the norm to start over with a new contract, or do you continue, like, let's say you're in year 1 of a 3-year contract already?
So typically, when someone comes to us new and they've not proven themselves for us, we will start them in a 1-year contract. After they've already been here, decisions on contract length and salary increases are made by policy 5325. So we take into accordance their evaluations. We take into into consideration their performance. So Bretta's performance has been pristine. She and I would want to hold on to her for as long as you possibly could as a district. And so that's my recommendation, is for 3 years, but it's put before you. You can certainly appoint her, as Andrew has indicated to at least the chair and vice chair. I'm not sure if it was to everyone. You have the ability to put forth whatever contract length you recommend. I've not done that in the past. I've decided based upon this policy. But I know that it's been a discussion at the table, and I wanted to be very transparent about what I was recommending and let you decide. And that's what Andrew recommended as a vehicle to do that.
Yeah. Okay. So the motion is, again, do you want to, it was made by J.C.? Yeah.
To accept the superintendent's appointment of Bretta Combs to the Pupil Personnel Services Director.
Okay. All in favor?
Oh, should we say with a 3-year contract? With a 3-year contract.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Oh, I was an aye. So motion passes.
Yay! Thank you, Bretta.
Thank you.
Would you like to stand and say a few words? Nah. Okay. All right. Moving on. So the second appointment recommendation that I would like to make this evening is for Tammy Mcneese to be appointed as interim principal for Broad Rock Middle School. And so this is a very unusual sort of vacancy, and it's a very unusual thing to appoint someone interim. So this is the theory and thinking behind that. Typically, when there is a vacancy due to retirement, and Kathy Egan retired, we would advertise, we would put together a committee, and we're going to talk more about that later in the agenda. I think it's school committee item F, about what to do with the rest of the vacancies that we have and what we typically do and what the policy tells you to do. In this case, at this table, you have made a decision on a facilities plan that will collapse Curtis Corner Middle School and combine your 2 middle schools. That is not going to be an attractive advantage for outside candidates. So one of the things that I did, which I ran by the chair and vice chair and legal, is about a month ago I met with almost every person who would be credentialized or have interest in this job in our administrative group, in the same spirit of when you were considering making reductions, to figure out what would they be willing to do, who was interested in doing work like this, and who would be interested in taking an interim position that we had confidence in, the cabinet, so myself, Mary Ann, Pauline, and Teresa, and Tammy is aware that when the 2 middle schools combined, then she likely will become an assistant principal again. So that's a part of the contract that you would be honoring. I mean, things change, and maybe we'll have 5 middle schools in a couple of years. So I think Andrew is certainly gifted enough to write a contract that will be both pleasing for Tammy and the committee in that regard. But we're well aware that it's interim time. You may choose to close Curtis Corner Middle School next year, not this September. Let's just be clear about that. And if you do, then she fully understands what her role will be and is willing to help and will do an excellent job at it. And so I am recommending Tammy Mcneese as interim principal with a 3-year contract, but that 3-year contract will be written in a way so that it's clear she may not be the Broad Rock Middle School principal for 3 years, but you're giving a commitment to her because she's giving a commitment to you.
Can I just ask questions before we make a motion? So, wouldn't that leave a vacancy at? Wouldn't that leave a vacancy at Curtis Corner?
It will, and I was planning to discuss that with the other vacancies that you have on item 6F, if that's all right with you. You can discuss it now, but there are other...
Yeah, well, I think it would... Yeah, I mean, I think it would be helpful to discuss what we're going to do there. I guess
so. Typically what we do when there's a vacancy is we advertise it. We advertise it in accordance with the personnel assignment team policy. And so we would put something on School Spring and advertise internally, invite internal applicants and external applicants, anyone who is certified.
No, I understand, but I'm wondering why we're not doing that right now for Broad Rock.
I think that's part of I mean, there's a longer conversation, I think, for later in the agenda about opportunities, but I hear what you're saying, Dr. Stringfellow, which is this is a very unique position.
Correct.
Given that there's going to be a collapse of 2 schools, and so that, I think, is part of why you're recommending this now. So I'm happy to make a motion to appoint Tammy if we're at that point. Okay, so let me rephrase that a little nicer. I'd like to make a motion to appoint Tammy Mcneese to the interim principal at Broad Rock Middle School for a 3-year contract, but given the fact that that might be a shorter-term contract because the schools are going to collapse.
It'll be a 3-year contract with a different role.
I got it. Okay. All right.
When and if the schools collapse, Andrew has been asked to come up with language that would address that.
So let me rephrase that. So
3-year contract as an administrator.
Thank you. A 3-year contract for Tammy Mcneese as an administrator and an assignment to interim principal at Broad Rock Middle School.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so that motion carries 7-0.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations.
Would you like to say a few words, Tammy?
Congratulations to both of you, and congratulations, Teresa, on your retirement. Thank you.
So the second item is just an absolutely lovely piece for me to be able to report. It's our Teacher of the Year nominees, and we are so fortunate to have so many wonderful teachers in our district that have been nominated by either their peers, by a student, by a parent. And so typically what we've done is I've announced them if they want to brave the obstacle course of coming to shake your hands and not falling on the microphone, that is an option. But Pauline has always been kind enough to hand out a certificate that we've made for them to honor them. And is that the way you'd like to proceed? Okay. So, annually, the South Kingstown School District honors teachers who have been nominated to be considered as South Kingstown Teacher of the Year. Tonight, we shall honor each nominee. All of our wonderful nominees are talented, hardworking, highly effective professionals, and we are so fortunate that they have chosen to teach in our South Kingstown educational community. Later this week, we will announce who among them has been selected or will be selected to be South Kingstown Teacher of the Year, who will go on to represent our community of learners and who will compete for Rhode Island Teacher of the Year. This teacher will represent all of the fine educators in our school department. In honoring you all this evening, we honor all of your school and departmental and grade level colleagues and the excellence that is teacher quality and education in South Kingstown. The South Kingstown School Department is very proud to recognize these amazing and talented teachers who have been nominated for South Kingstown Teacher of the Year. It is our great privilege to honor the following teachers. Karen Perry, Special Educator, Curtis Corner Middle School. Congratulations, Karen. Pauline's a hugger. That's why she gets it. I know. Kate Aruda, Math Teacher, Curtis Corner Middle School. I'll get in the hug line.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Kristen Precious, English teacher, Curtis Corner Middle School. Jen DeFeo, grade 5, Broad Rock Middle School. Eric Anderson, Dean of Students, South Kingstown High School. I think Eric had a track commitment this evening. He would totally be sad that he missed the hug, however. It's just a hug, and you will. We'll have to make a special trip. Ryan Borden, special educator, Curtis Corner Middle School. Karen Campbell, special educator, West Kingston Elementary School. Eric Swanson, school construction CTE coordinator for the high school. Stacy Zamperini, former Peacedale teacher and high school health and phys ed, and adaptive phys ed.
I want to speak for Stacy that she's not here because she's working with our unified basketball.
That's right. Thank you for mentioning that. And Terry McKinney, DLI English first grade teacher, Peacedale Elementary School. So if you see Pauline and I arrive in your school sometime this week, it might mean that we're able to bestow an honor on you, that you would be our representative, but it would be our pleasure to have any of you to represent our school district, our students, and our really amazing teachers. So thank you so much for your work. Thank you for your lifelong devotion to the children of South Kingstown. One more clap. And the next agenda item that we have is the meeting calendar. You'll note that there is not a business item for April 23rd, so at this time that meeting is canceled. And we have our super fun public budget hearings with the town council next week, the 15th and the 16th. The public is certainly invited to attend, and it is at the town council chambers.
Michelle has a comment on that. Or are you still covering other stuff in the calendar?
Nope.
Okay.
I just wanted to, looking at the calendar on the public budget hearings Tuesday night and Wednesday night, I just want folks on the committee and in the community to know that I teach until 9:30 on Wednesday night. So unless you want to start the meeting at 10.
It's only it's Monday, Tuesday.
I have it in my calendar as Tuesday, Wednesday.
I think it's Monday, Tuesday.
Oh, then I'll be there.
Okay.
Good thing you said something, see?
It's a good thing I said something right.
Also, something I think is important to note is, because I don't know if communication has gone out about the special education community conversation that we're planning for May 28th. So I'm sure that we will be sharing details of what that will involve, but for those in the community, the school community that would be interested in participating on that, just be on the lookout for that.
We'll be sending out an invitation, and we'll put something on the district Facebook, but thank you for mentioning that. We have a special evening planned for you on May 28th here in the cafeteria, community conversation on special education. And so we look forward to that. Thank you. Financial update. Does anyone have any questions on that matter?
I do. So I certainly don't want our kids getting cheese sandwiches. I am 100% on board with making sure all of our kids have access to lunch. But this lunch balance is creeping up, and I know I've mentioned it at a lot of meetings thus far. It concerns me that every single month it's getting higher and higher, and we're upwards of like $30,000. And I think at that point, it's a number that's really worth looking at and figuring out what are we going to do about that. We need a plan, because we need a plan.
Notification is going out to the parents a couple of times a week. We do have staff at the schools also reaching out to the parents.
And with the notification to the parents, is that electronic with a link where you could pay it right in the
It's a letter
email?
that also states where they can go on the link and they can pay it online if they choose to.
But is there an email that's with a link in addition?
Yeah, it's enough information. A lot of them
So
will
it's
call it. There's enough-
electronic and a paper letter?
And also anyone who has signed up for the My School Box, they can set it up when a balance gets a certain dollar amount that they are notified via that.
Okay, so then my next question would be, this may not be appropriate, I'm not sure, but would it be appropriate to not, obviously confidentiality, not send these people to resources in the community, but maybe partner or collaborate with some resources in the community like the Johnny Cake Center? Perhaps Kate could reach out to her families, saying if you're having an issue with providing your kids with school lunch and or need assistance.
So it typically remember that it's not affecting students who qualify for free and reduced lunch. So likely, and what we've shared in the past is we have had a trend at the high school, and we have had a trend at the high school with students perhaps not sharing with their families that they are eating lunch, and then it comes as a bill. So remember, when we put this into existence, the idea was to keep the conversation about money away from the children, which I completely support. And so what we're finding is lots of kids are going through the high school line and just taking whatever it is that they're hungry for, and then their parents are being billed.
So I understand that it doesn't have anything to do with free and reduced lunch, but the Johnny Cake Center it also deals with people that are in situations where they may not be qualifying for certain benefits. So what I'm wondering is, can these people not afford, the people that are contributed, their balances are contributing to this $28,000, can they not afford to pay it, or are they just not paying it? You know, there could be a difference. Where is the gap happening?
So one of the first things that we do is that the principals will assign either the social worker or guidance counselor or a school psychologist to reach out to the families to ask them if they would like to fill out a form for free and reduced lunch, if they understand that they can qualify mid-year. So the first year we did this, they didn't realize my circumstances have changed. In the beginning of the year when we were filling out these forms, I didn't qualify. Then I lost my job in October or November. That was a welcome call to some families. The feedback that we've received from the principals are that generally it's families that, I mean, you never know who can afford what, but it's generally families that are not struggling economically, that are. Well, exactly. I agree. She asked.
I guess my issue
you
is
never
that,
know
like,
how people are struggling.
How much time are we spending? I mean, I'm assuming that Mary Ann is spending more time than a highly qualified CFO should be spending, like chasing school dollars.
But it's not just myself, it's also your administrators, your
right, I mean, that's what I mean, like it's certainly not the most it's not like a fiscal watchdog type of thing to say, but I do think at some point when we're talking about just providing nutrition for kids, how much time are we willing to let a senior administrator spend trying to like pick apart who can afford what? Because I mean, I've been through many times where I'm like, this is a bad month, you know what I mean? And it doesn't mean I'm going to go through the steps of what do I qualify for, but I still want my child to eat. And I don't know, I know that like $28,000 is a lot, but in general, sometimes you look at things and you're like, just this is like a goodwill write-off for student nutrition. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how much time we want Mary Ann and other senior admins spending like hounding people over a $1.50 lunch. I don't know. Yeah.
So we're not the only district who's dealing with it, too. I believe Cranston was in the news about it, and the balance keeps going up and up and up. So I agree with you, but there has to be some sort of stop, because eventually it's going to be 50, and then eventually it's going to be 70. So it's not just us. So I guess maybe we could figure out what other districts are doing to see what we can do to reel it in, because...
So we've talked to other districts. This has come up, I know, at superintendent's meetings, and Cranston did the Dunning notice. I'm not interested in that. I don't think you are, but every district, it seems to be a different group. So usually it's not the elementary students in the districts that I've spoken to. It's either been middle school students or high school. For us, it has been in the past high school. And you know, other than just alerting parents, because parents sometimes get the call from the principal and they are very surprised. Other parents and say, oh my goodness, I'm going to pay this right away. Other parents are very warmly receiving the call from the social worker to fill out the free and reduced lunch application, and then they would never have a balance continue because they're not paying, you know, so that gets wiped away. We are completely open to other suggestions. Chartwell's takes the first blush with the letter, then the administrators make personal phone, then the social workers reach out, then the administrators make personal phone calls.
I like all the steps that we're taking so far, and I guess I lean towards not wanting to overreact about the amount, and I think if we have a social worker and the principal follow up with families individually, that's a way to sort of keep a handle on top of this amount and continue to talk with other districts about what they're doing. But I lean towards, I don't want to overreact. Kids are getting fed, and that seems worth it to me. And I do think there are some sort of systems set up to try and deal with the cost. Like my understanding, for example, if you're in the middle school or high school, you don't get to add extras, for example, like a second milk or chips or a cookie, you know, if you have
it's not the a la carte item.
A negative balance, right? It's just the meal. So I think there are some structures set up, I think, especially for the older kids to make sure that they don't...
That's what's in place with the older kids. If an older child has a balance, they are not allowed to buy a la carte things with a balance. However, if they have money for a la carte, we're not preventing them from using that money to buy a la carte if they have a lunch balance. They're not allowed to charge a la carte items. So we have seen where children have cash or money available for a la carte items, but they don't have money available for lunch. We are giving them lunch, and we are allowing them to buy the a la carte with the cash they have in hand.
All right. I don't think we need to take up any more time on it. It sounds like there are systems in place and it's being followed and it's being paid closely attention to. So I think we can move on.
So the next item is our award winners for the month. And the Key Is Me Award recipient is maybe still in the audience. Yes, she is, Terry McKinney, a grade 1 DLI English side teacher at Peacedale Elementary School. Terry was hired as a self-contained classroom teacher, a special education teacher at Peacedale Elementary School in 1998. In 2007, she transferred to a grade 1 teaching position at Peacedale, and in 2016, she took on her current role as a grade 1 DLI teacher. She is certified in elementary bilingual and dual language immersion grades 1 through 6, English side. She's certified in English as a second language, grades 1 through 6, and elementary education, grades 1 through 6. She received her Bachelor of Science in Elementary Education at the University of Rhode Island. And the rationale that accompanied this teacher's nomination is that Terry is a nurturing educator who truly cares about each and every student and goes out of her way to make them feel safe and successful. She works hard to create personal bonds with her students and uses those bonds to help inspire an eagerness to learn. That she always communicates with families, whether via email, phone, or in-person meetings. She listens and collaborates with them to find strategies that work for each student. She is a resourceful educator who is always looking for ways to improve her practice with the best interest of students always in mind. She recognizes her students' achievements, praises, and acknowledges their strengths on a regular basis. Ms. McKinney has gone out of her way to make my son feel safer and more successful in her classroom. Her persistence and dedication to her students is commendable. Congratulations, Ms. McKinney. The I Make a Difference Award recipient for April is Cheryl Dyer, Special Education Teacher Assistant at Matunic Elementary School. Cheryl was hired as a teacher assistant at Peacedale in 1996. She then spent a year at both Wakefield and the Farm School before transferring to Hazard in 2000. After working at Hazard for 10 years, Cheryl transferred to her current position at Matunic. She graduated from South Kingstown High School, and the rationale that accompanied this nomination is that Cheryl Dyer is an expert at working with students with challenging behaviors. She anticipates her children's needs and makes them feel safe and comfortable. She is always kind and gentle and treats everyone with respect and warmth. She welcomes each student with a smile and positive greeting when they get off the bus in the morning, setting them up for a successful day of learning. She is highly skilled in talking to and supporting dysregulated students. She is flexible, open to suggestions, and thorough in her follow-through. She works diligently to support the school community. Cheryl Dyer makes a significant difference in the lives of many Matunic students with her positive outlook and caring and supportive approach. Congratulations, Cheryl. Do we have a video? Yes, we do. Oh, we have a video. Okay. Can you cue up the video and I will? Okay. So the You Inspire Me Award was presented to John Gazzero, and I will let the video take over. He's a Matunic student.
Has made a difference in your school for both the teachers and the students, and that's why you were nominated. So they're going to tell you the particulars about that right now, okay? But congratulations.
Everybody. It is with great honor and enormous pride that we nominate John Gazzero as a candidate for the You Inspire Me Award. John is a perfect example of what it takes to be an outstanding student. Matunic elementary students and staff together each day state the Matunic Manchurite expectations, and it is our school goal to follow the expectations. Mrs. McGuire, teachers, and staff have all noticed John's marvelous moments and catch him following the Matunic Manchurite's expectations. Here are some examples. Matunic Manchurates respect all others. John has a smile on his face every day, which makes everyone around him smile. John volunteers to help with safety patrol and is always at his spot on time. John is a kind and attentive kindergarten helper. John uses expected behaviors during assemblies. John is a positive role model for his peers.
Matunic Manchurates respect yourself. Okay? John is always eager and willing to learn, even when faced with challenges. John always follows teacher direction and uses his time wisely. John advocates for himself when he has questions or concerns. John is an active member of the running club.
And Matunic Manchurates respect your surroundings. And John respects his property. He takes ownership and utilizes appropriate technology in and out of the classroom. John participates in special classroom jobs willingly and independently. And if you were to ask any student or adult at Matunic Elementary School, they would all agree that John is deserving of the You Inspire Me award. You do inspire me, John.
Me too.
I totally love it that he took a bow there at the end. That was priceless. So the teachers that nominated him are Beth McLaughlin, she's on the right, Kayla Tobin, who spoke in the beginning, and Shelley McConnell. So thank you so much for honoring this wonderful, wonderful student. The next item that we have is the South Kingstown Partnership for Prevention Rhode Island Student Survey data from 2018. And if we could please ask Melissa Mowry to come up and present the data for us. Thank you. She looked like she wanted some help there.
MK.
You're MK.
Yeah,
right.
yeah, I'm MK.
I thought maybe Melissa was sitting in the back.
No, Melissa can't be here tonight, but I'm the director of South Kingstown Partnership for Prevention, and I'd like to introduce Dr. Paul Florin. He is our independent evaluator for our Drug-Free Communities grant, for which we have all the funding to provide services in South Kingstown. We're going to present briefly. We sent all the more detailed data to each school administrator if they have any questions. We've already talked a little bit, but they can contact me after. This survey was taken between March and February, March of 2018 throughout the state. It measured the risk and prevalence of substance use, and grades 6 through 12 were surveyed throughout the state for a total of 22,294 students. In South Kingstown specifically, we surveyed grades 8 through 12 with a total of 1,020 students. And I'm going to hand over the statistical part to Dr. Florin.
Thank you for having me. I'm presenting this part, which was prepared by the region that South Kingstown is part of now. The state has chosen to divide the state as opposed to 35 different municipal task forces into 7 regions, and South Kingstown is one of those regions. The first slide indicates 30-day use that the students reported of alcohol. The issue is compared to the state, it would appear that the students are reporting a slightly higher than average use rate at 18.2%. However, I hasten to add that my data that I've collected for the drug-free communities indicates that the trend in alcohol is actually decreasing in South Kingstown. As a matter of fact, the trend in alcohol in South Kingstown for 30-day use has decreased 50% in the last 10 years. Marijuana use, a similar kind of situation where the youth are reporting a slightly higher 30-day use of marijuana. However, the trend data, you're following that this is comparing South Kingstown to the state. What I'm talking about vocally is comparing South Kingstown to itself over time. Comparing South Kingstown to itself over time, marijuana use is actually decreasing in the high school. So that's good news. As a matter of fact, it decreased by 2% from 2015 to 2018. And that means that the drug-free community grant that the partnership received has met one of its primary goals already that was targeted for 2020. Does that make sense? So you're to be congratulated already. Tobacco use, I hasten to add that this is only combustible tobacco use, what we used to call cigarettes. As with other substances, in this case, the South Kingstown students report less use than the statewide average. And as a matter of fact, the South Kingstown itself and the partnership should be congratulated because over the past 10 years, cigarette use, e-cigarettes are coming later, that's a problem. But cigarette use has gone down 80% over the last decade. Non-medical use of prescription drugs, these are things like stimulants, pain relievers, steroids, and so on. There's a slightly higher use in South Kingstown than in the state, and in fact, we find that that's true over time as well. So although the numbers are low, I repeat, the numbers are low. There's relatively small numbers of students using these substances. It is of concern, especially, of course, as you're all probably aware, because of pain relievers and the potential problems with opioids. Here's where the issue really arises in the e-cigarettes. You've probably all heard an awful lot about Juuls and vaping. There was an NPR special this morning on it. You see the incredible jump from 8th grade to 10th grade, and then again from 10th grade to 11th grade. I think that you've got a national expert in South Kingstown, and did you want to say a word about this?
I do, and I actually wanted to thank the district support. We've had, I think, a great collaboration with all the administrators in the district as well as with the health teachers. The health teachers, every single health teacher in the district was just trained in the Catch My Breath curriculum, which is a great, it's 4 lessons, 30 minutes, so everyone now in the district is trained in this, which I think is wonderful. And I just want to let you know, as the partnership, one of our goals is to target younger and younger students, and with that, the parents of younger and younger students. So you're going to see more initiatives with us trying to use, and I actually have one of our senior members of our youth group, we're going to be trying to develop more of a peer-to-peer model for use with students. I think, we can give them data and education all day long, but when they're able to hear it from a student, I think it's very impactful. Abigail Hedgeland is in the audience here tonight. She's helping us with that. So just to let you know, more is coming, and we will provide as much as we can to the district to combat this.
I'm going to do the last 2 slides that I'm going to do concern the age of first use. The first thing that I'd like to point out is that the majority of students never use alcohol, or report, just to be precise, never using alcohol. The other thing to note is that if they are going to use alcohol, the majority of them begin at age 14 or 15. The same thing with marijuana. 73%, nearly 3/4 of the students report never trying marijuana, which is quite a remarkable thing nowadays with all the publicity about medical marijuana and recreational marijuana being legal in states like Massachusetts and so on and so forth. But similarly, the first use begins in age 14 and 15, so it's a great place to target. Now I'm going to turn it over, back over to MK.
Yeah, thanks. And I'm actually going to have Abby come up with me for this one. This is a statistic that normally brings pause to any district. We have 11.4% of students that have seriously considered attempting suicide. I do want to point out that this does not include having a plan, and it does not include an attempt. But we do have, over 11% of our students who have considered it. We are not alone to the state averages for this, but it is something that we take seriously. And over the past 2 years, we've kind of changed course in our prevention efforts to incorporate more wellness initiatives and to be providing students as many coping skills and stress-relieving activities as possible. And I just wanted to bring Abby up. She's spearheaded her own wellness committee as part of our Ripple group, and is just doing fantastic work. So we are combating this as well. We generally look at, mental health as being a huge component of substance abuse prevention. And I wanted to applaud Abby while she's here, and also just have her let you know 2 of the initiatives that Ripple's working on.
Yeah, so I am the Wellness Initiative Coordinator at Ripple, and our committee is currently working on, first, a Mental Health Awareness Week in May, which is Mental Health Awareness Month, just to raise awareness, but also to cure the stigma surrounding mental health. So we're going to be planning events surrounding that. And we also every Monday we offer Mindful Mondays, which is a chance for students to come in during advisory and meditate as a way to relieve stress. Also, we have a wellness corner in the library where students can pick up coloring pages, stress balls, anything that can help them relieve stress in a healthy way. So that's always available for students.
So Abby was just recently a speaker at the State of Education address with Commissioner Wagner, and was one of those brave students that brought up a question to his attention. And do you mind sharing what your plans are to be when you are a professional? Because I was insanely impressed by it, so I'm sure they all will be too.
Yeah, so I'm planning on studying public health in college, and so I'm hoping to help prevent mental illness in the future.
Thank you.
So thank you to Abby, and just, you can see why SKPP puts so much effort into our students. We think Abby is an example of a way to change the future, and we think Abby helps provide protective factors to other students, and being a part of the youth group allows students to have a voice where maybe they feel like they're not always heard elsewhere. So again, congratulate Abby. It's what makes my job just so amazing, is getting to work with people like her. And just to conclude, thank you so much. If you do have any questions pertaining these data, you can contact me at any time. I'm always available. So thank you so much.
So the next item that we have is we were notified by the Rhode Island Department of Education that our Stage 2 necessity for school construction application was going to be postponed for a few months, and somewhere in this pile I have a timeline. So we wanted to let you know that the school department and the school committee especially have been very hard at work supporting the facilities project since the letter was received on March 4th. The school committee chair and vice chair and I, they asked me to provide an update to the school community of our timeline and our efforts. So on March 4th, Rhode sent the letter of Stage 2 postponement, and that is on board docs. The same day we had a school building committee, they formally received the letter of correspondence, and the chair of the school building committee, council member DeCruz, sent a letter to Rhode asking to meet very quickly so that we could understand the details and to ensure that the summer safety projects go forward as planned. On March 12th, he sent another email to Rhode, and Christine Lopes-Metcalf responded the next day saying that the details that are posted on board docs would be received very, very soon. On March 13th, the school committee chair, Cantor, Marianne Crawford, and I met with RGB about the letter, and we requested a meeting with town council president and the town manager to follow up, and that's being scheduled. On March 25th, Mr. DeCruz sent another follow-up letter to Christine, and on March 27th, they sent us the Stage 2 postponement details. On April 4th, there was a meeting with School Committee Chair Cantor, Ms. Northup, Ms. Comiskey, myself, Mrs. Crawford, RGB, the town manager, and Council Member DeCruz as the School Building Committee Chair, and Andrew Hennius, legal lawyer to the school department. We went through the Stage 2 response details page by page, and we have asked RGB for a response, and subsequent meetings will be happening. But at this point, we're very hopeful that the summer projects on safety for the elementary schools in Curtis Corner will be supported by Rhode and will be complete before the end of the summer. We feel very well positioned to be approved for the Stage 2 application in the fall. And I think that's the end of my superintendent's report.
Is there a motion to accept the superintendent's report?
I'd like to make a motion to accept the superintendent's report.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. All right. So next on the agenda is the consent agenda, and I think you wanted to pull Does anyone at the table need to pull anything?
Yeah, if we could just pull item B from the consent agenda?
Can we just table it? Can we table it now, or do we have to?
pull it.
You just pull it completely?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to go to the business agenda? Okay.
No, because we're not going to vote on it tonight.
Okay. Anything else need to be pulled?
I have a hand carry of a resignation of Nicole Nieves.
Is there a hand carry for a fundraiser too?
Yes, there was, but there was also an updated memo that was put on the board docs on Monday morning also.
Okay.
With that one, with an update,
So we're good.
adding another school to it.
Okay.
I'm not remembering if you need a second and a vote, or you just pull it. Is it a pull like a table?
Oh, I guess we were talking about that. So if I pull it and make a motion and we vote on it, that's fine, right? It just kind of goes away
I think you
for
can
now.
postpone it to the next meeting.
Just make a motion to pull it.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to postpone item B to the next meeting.
I'll second that.
All in favor? Aye. Okay. Is there a motion to approve, anything else of issue? Okay. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Second? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Right, the consent agenda is approved, and we'll move on now to community comment. And I'll just reiterate the protocol from bylaws. Please introduce yourself first and last name. Please limit individual comments to 3 minutes. I will gently alert you when that time has passed, and you can always send remaining thoughts and resources via email. Speaker comments shall be brief and focused on the issue. Speakers are encouraged to write down their thoughts before approaching the committee. Community comment is not a time to engage in a question and answer dialogue. Groups and organizations are encouraged to appoint a spokesperson. Individuals may address the committee once during community comments, and please remember to direct all your comments directly to the chair. Timer.
Hi, I'm Rob Mezzanotti. I'm the principal of the high school. I just wanted to make a comment tonight on item 6D, which is the proposed amendment to the PAT policy, because I think it's important that the committee has an understanding of how this may affect students at the high school if it's passed. So at the high school, we have a current program that we've started in our science department called biomedical science. The passing of that policy may have an impact on the students who elected to sign up for that program for next year. We have 48 freshmen slated to be enrolled for that program. The change that was proposed, that is being proposed for that policy, may impact the individual who is qualified to teach that class. Teaching that class requires the teacher to have training, specialized training that's aligned to the program that we partnered with for that particular program. That training took place over the summer. That individual was trained, who's slated to teach that course, and that individual may be affected by the change to the policy. I just wanted to make sure that people were aware of that is something that could very well be affected, and if that were the case, that the 48 students who had elected to take that course would not be able to. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Shivani Finkelstein. I'm the assistant principal at the high school. In the last 2 years, I've been involved in putting a lot of CTE programs and biomedical program, as Mr. Mezzanotti pointed out, that have lots of different requirements. So the teachers that have been involved in these programs have worked really hard, attended different trainings that are required. Some of these trainings are directly tied to our CTE certifications. So just to kind of name a few, Project Lead the Way, which is a biomedical program, has a 4-course sequence, and the teacher is required to get training every summer. The training is very intense. They have taken time out of their family lives in the summer for 2 weeks to attend this training. At the end of the training, they receive a certificate. Without the certificate, we cannot offer this program. So in the last 2 years, this has been a very popular program. We have had 40 students that took the first sequence and really enjoyed the program and have gone on to the second course, which another science teacher has volunteered to go to the training this summer. So this is like a 4-year rollout that was planned out. I also want to address that policy that Rob talked about. I'm really urging the committee to perhaps connect one of us with Ms. Barden, who has been involved in revising the program, so we can kind of work with her to put something in there that will allow us to continue to do this work. Our computer science is in a similar boat. The teachers that have attended the training, they have gone to code.org training in different parts of the states, depending on where it's offered. And without these teachers, we cannot offer the program unless we have somebody who is trained before this year starts. So at the point we are in the scheduling process right now, if they are gone from our buildings, we have all these students that have signed up for all these courses and all these programs that might have a risk where we won't be able to offer those. We would really love to kind of work with the revision, whoever has been involved in the revision, to kind of bring to the table what are the different things that can be at jeopardy for students and kind of work with them together to see how we can make this work. So I appreciate your time and I appreciate you listening to us. I have tons of other detail that I don't want to bore you with, but thank you for listening.
My name's Tia Beckman, and I have been with the South Kingstown Immigration Task Force, and I saw that you have it on the agenda. I really appreciate that you're looking into this. The things that we are really looking for is continual staff education, and the privacy of student information. And one of the things that hasn't been brought up a whole lot is about the student directory and the student privacy. And now, as a Smiles advocate, I heard that there may be some funding difficulties for Smiles Club. And my son went in it, was a participant. It is a wonderful experiential group learning, task completion. I got to join them on a few trips as a chaperone. And they went to such phenomenal places as the Bay Campus and met with scientists there, going on the ships, talking with Dr. Ballard, who found the Titanic via video. They also had college weekend with engineering challenge throughout the states with groups throughout the state. There's just so much exposure, hands-on experiential exposure with science and math that I want to put my 2 points in for this great program. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Brian Nelson, NEASK President. I'll be brief tonight, but I want to thank you for discussing the personal assignment policy later on this evening. This time of the year is especially difficult for many of our teachers. The weather is getting warmer, and the 2018-2019 school year is coming to an end. Due to budget cuts, many of our excellent teachers are going to receive a letter in the mail, certified of course, informing them that they're going to be either laid off or that they'll have an unknown job assignment for next year. When a teacher is laid off or is looking at a potential forced job change, the one thing that teachers request is a transparent process and how their new job placement will be determined or if they will have a job at all. Under the current policy, this simply is not happening for many of our teachers. I know I'm not the first union president to say this, since the policy has been enacted nearly 9 years ago. The current personnel assignment policy, which was once called the human capital policy for years, has been a major source of stress on our outstanding educators and continues to do so. As union vice president, last year and president this year, I've had many conversations with our teachers about the policy and how confusing and unclear it is to even our most experienced teachers. This is unacceptable. Sadly, many of our teachers who have experienced the PAP process firsthand are afraid to speak up tonight. And what makes this even more frustrating is that so much of this is avoidable. Other districts around the state, including North Kingstown, Barrington, Chariho, East Greenwich, Newport, East Providence, Cumberland, and Scituate, to just name a few, have a personal assignment process that are much more transparent and predictable and still allows the district to make the necessary cuts when needed. The current policy is a major source of anxiety for the teachers of our district. In a recent 2018-2019 NEA-SK teacher morale survey, the personnel assignment policy was identified as one of the most significant factors in why morale should be better. This is a huge problem that needs to be addressed now. On behalf of the over 300 people who this impacts, thank you for your time.
Carol Englander, Director of the SMILE program, and I thank Tia for her kind words, and I certainly enjoyed having her son in SMILE. I was crunching numbers today, and I astounded myself, because it turns out we've had about 670 students since 1994 graduate high school from SMILE in South Kingstown, and of 670, 572 have gone on to college. That's phenomenal. That's an 87%. I get goosebumps thinking of all the kids that we have put on a path to higher education and who are now the doctors, the lawyers, the child development center owners in Rhode Island and elsewhere. The other interesting fact that as I was crunching numbers, was looking at the diversity in all of the SMILE clubs, the elementary, the middle, and the high school. So SMILE tries to reflect the diversity in our community, and we certainly aim to enhance the aspirations of the minority community. It turns out that when I went over every application that was accepted, the elementary has a little over 50% minority children. And this includes African American, Native American, Hispanic, and Cuban, I'm trying to think what, Portuguese. It was interesting. Middle school is about 54% minority, and the high school was over 60% minority. And I am very pleased because not only do we have teachers who guide students on experiences in STEM, but they are also advocates for the education of these students. And so when a child comes to us and says they were recommended for a B-level nursing course or biology course, and the child has no person in their family who can go to the guidance in the high school and say, I need to be in the A level because I want to be a nurse. Somebody from SMILE will stand up for that child and go and advocate for them. And that was a South Kingstown student who was told what class she should have been taking so that she would pass and do okay. And instead, we forced the issue. She took the A-level course. She did well in it. She went on to the University of Rhode Island, and in 4 years, she graduated with a BS in nursing. So when we're thinking about looking for funding, I think that the SMILE program is something that should be a line item on forever, because it does what it's supposed to do, and all of you have every reason to be proud of the accomplishments. And I think that the students in SMILE now will be the replacements of some of us sitting or talking right now. So thank you.
Mick LaFort, 6th grade at Broad Rock Middle School. I'm also the NEASK Vice President. I just want to speak quickly about the PAT process. Over the last couple of days or so, we've been talking extensively with our membership because there's been a lot of confusion. And I think a lot of it is just because of the intersect of just the fact of the timing of this. Had this conversation been going on at the beginning of the year, I think it would be fine. The problem right now is that the PAT process is being confused with the process that goes into deciding who gets laid off and who does not. I want to make sure that everyone's aware, and Shivani mentioned getting a hold of Mary Barton. We've talked to Mary Barton at great length because our membership had this concern. The PAT process is not related to layoffs at all. So those two fantastic programs at the high school, they won't be affected by this. Whoever stays, the positions that stay and that go, those are based on a layoff process that's not the PAT process. The PAT process is all about transfers for those teachers who still have positions. So I want to make sure that's clear. We've had, again, an extensive time kind of explaining this to teachers throughout. This has no bearing, the PAT process, if it goes forward, it has no bearing on layoffs. I think that if this conversation were taking place in September or November, this confusion wouldn't be happening. But I think that's a really, really important thing to point out. If those positions at the high school, those people who've been gone through that training, if those positions don't exist, it's because of layoffs and something totally separate. The PAT process wouldn't affect that.
Hello, David DeQuatro with RGB Architects. I just wanted to let people know that this was sent out today to everyone to make sure everyone got this response. And there's a couple of keys that you should see. It's kind of overwhelming when you first start to read it.
No, it hasn't been distributed because we just didn't get it in enough time to actually post it after.
So when you do get it, there's two pieces of paper. One is the design review, which is a checklist, which we have to do to submit it. The second one is part of that, referencing that checklist. And then the third is the larger diagram, which shows all the responses. And then the fourth is a small arrow on each one of them, which are stage 3 requirements. So I did a little bit more research, and there's nothing fatal about what was submitted. They pushed it off, and as I know, there were 4 volunteer towns or cities that would volunteer to be pushed off to November. We weren't volunteered. Obviously, we submitted that, but we were the only one that got the extra $150,000 to give us more information. And that's a lot of the stuff that we're asking for is more information. And what we found out is that I guess Rhode has had a lot of experience with existing projects such as the high school and the middle school projects. They go into cost overrun and change orders, so they want to make sure that everything is vetted out. We understand the logistics of it, they understand the logistics and the risks of it, and that's why they've asked for this extra work. So I've illustrated this on these 3 documents. If anyone has any questions, they can ask. Obviously, you may not have it now if you haven't distributed it, but in the future, we're always available for that. Okay? Thanks.
Is there any further community comment at this time? Okay. Thought she was getting up to... All right, so with that, we can move to school committee business. And to begin, we're going to look at the Public Works District efficiency audit that 3 of us at the table had learned a bit about when we were in Philadelphia at the NSBA. national conference, which was a really incredible, informative experience. And this is one that we really took away as thinking this really could be something that puts us in a position to give the community and essentially town council what they have been asking for so many years, which is a more holistic, long-term view of operational efficiency. So we had communicated with Eric Schnurr, hopefully I'm not mispronouncing his last name, and thankfully he actually has, a network in Rhode Island. This is what he does for a living, is essentially dig into municipalities and public organizations to really streamline their processes. So he has made the trip to join us and has some information to share and present if he's still here. There you are. Okay. Do you want to come on up? Okay. And I know it was kind of last minute, but I forwarded everybody at the table some of the information too, just to give some background on what you do.
Well, thanks for having me. I think I'm going to rotate around a little bit because I think this is relevant to taxpayers, community members, teachers, and parents as well. So I'd like to include them in the discussion, and I want to have this hopefully be as much of a discussion as possible, not just talk at you. So I'm going to encourage you to interrupt and ask questions at any point. Maybe not everybody in the audience because there'd be too many interruptions. But I brought a PowerPoint, but I don't do PowerPoints because I find that something always goes wrong with the technology, and people wind up staring at them, and the speaker winds up just reading the PowerPoint slides and might as well have stayed home. So I'm going to drop this off for you. I brought up a copy for each of the 7 of you and one for the superintendent. If I realized the other 2 people were here, I would have made an extra copy. But I'll drop these off afterwards, and for now I'll just talk and give a summary of the presentation I gave in Philadelphia. Was about a 45-minute presentation. I'm going to try to run through this a lot quicker and just give you a high-level thing, and then there's some more detail on the paper. And let me drop that for the time being. Let me see if I can kind of rotate around here and talk to everybody. All right, so my name is Eric Schnurr, and you pronounced that perfectly, which is extremely rare. I was glad to see that the Erics were very highly represented in the Teacher of the Year nominees. So that's at least a good point. So I'm going to give you some quick background on me because it leads into why I do what I do and what led me to be here. I grew up in Northern California, but I have some Rhode Island experience. That I came here first as a student at Brown University. And, of course, whenever I went home over vacations, people asked me what it was like to live on an island, because Rhode Island isn't really well known in the San Francisco Bay Area. But I really fell in love with the state, and like any good Californian, I had a car while I was here, because you can't live without a car in California. So it allowed me to get around and see a lot of the state. I had a particular affinity for Tweet Balzano's restaurant. Some of you may know that was a long mainstay over on the other side of the bay. So I got to know the state fairly well, but as I told the chair, I've only been to South Kingstown once before. There was a band called Roomful of Blues that played a concert at I don't remember exactly where it was, but there's some bar in South Kingstown that I've been to. That's my knowledge of South Kingstown. But anyway, I got to know Rhode Island pretty well, and I really fell in love with the place. And it's a very unique state with a lot of character. I would move here if the winters weren't so bad, but being a Californian at heart, I find it a little bit cold. But I've continued to do a lot of work here as an adult. I've worked with a number of your state leaders on various policy issues, and we did a whole review of the state's workforce system a couple of years ago for Governor Raimondo. And I've continued teaching on and off at my alma mater. I taught in the public policy program at Brown about a decade ago, and I taught there again this past fall. So I get to Rhode Island fairly frequently. I really like the place. Subsequently to being here, I got a degree in public policy. I got a law degree and moved to Philadelphia, where I took a judicial clerkship after law school and then was hired to be the deputy chief of staff to the governor of Pennsylvania. I practiced law for a while, and then one day, and this is a long story in and of itself, so I'll skip it, but I had the unique experience of literally waking up to a phone call one morning to tell me that I was the chief of staff to the governor. So I wound up my career in state government in Pennsylvania Pennsylvania as the chief of staff, which was a job that I really liked. And after leaving that, I wanted to continue doing what I liked about being in government, which was basically policy and the strategy around how you actually make things happen. And I also had, like I think most people who aren't consultants, I had a fairly jaundiced view of consultants because I knew from being in the government you can spend a lot of money on a report that then sits on a shelf and nothing ever happens from it. And my goal was to actually kind of try to deliver value for taxpayers and make sure that whatever we did in the consulting business that I started made things happen and actually produced the changes we were brought in to do and not just producing reports that would sit on a shelf. So the original idea really was to do creative public policy. But in 2002, 2003, there was a very deep recession prior to the big one that we all know about roughly a decade ago. And from that time pretty much onward to today, there's been much less of an interest in creative policy, and we don't get as many requests to creatively solve a problem as we used to. The thing that I get from most people in the public sector is, can you save us money? Can you figure out how to cut our budget without cutting things that we care about? And that's become the bulk of the work that we do. It's probably about 75% of our business these days. We've done these comprehensive efficiency reviews of the entire state government in 7 different states. We've done reviews of state agencies or subdivisions of state government, municipal governments, and so forth in about 3 dozen states. And about a half dozen years ago, we started expanding our work into school districts and bringing this sort of review process to school districts around the country. And we recently entered into an agreement with the National School Boards Association, the NSBA, to work with them to offer a service like this to school districts around the country. So that's the general background of how I came to do what I do. Let me talk about generally what it is that we do, how you do this sort of thing. And the thing that I think is really important is basically everywhere we go, because budgets have been tight everywhere at every level of government, from school districts on up to the federal government for the last 15 years, really since the last recession. Everywhere you go, people say, well, we've already done everything we can do to cut the budget. We're at wit's end. There's nothing else we can do to find ways to save money because we've cut everything that would be cut, that could be cut. And basically, our conclusion after doing this for a long time is the best way to save money isn't by cutting things. If your state wanted, as all states do, if you wanted to save money, I could tell you how to save most of the state budget right now. You shut down all the schools, you close the prisons and let everybody go free, and you cut out the Medicaid program. And that would save huge amounts of money overnight. The problem is down the road you'd have huge expenses. That's not a very smart way to save money. Cutting very rarely is how you're going to bring a budget under control. But looking at how you can do what you do more efficiently and do it better, and focus on customer service and so forth, that's the way that you can make lasting savings that amount to appreciable amounts of money without cutting the things that people care about. Now this is particularly difficult in the school context, which I think everybody here would know, because of every unit of government, the school districts are the one where the highest percentage of your money goes into actual delivery of services. It's not people sitting around processing checks or that kind of things. It's 3/4 of your money is going into the classroom. So it's more difficult to find ways to save money in school districts than it is in just about any other level of government. And all of you, I think, have struggled with all of this. But where do you look? You don't look in schools or in state governments or in the federal government or in the city government at the budget, which is how public officials tend to look at where can we save money. You get out the budget, go down the list and say, gee, we've cut everything that we can really cut comfortably. We're stuck cutting things that we either don't want to cut or we can't figure out how to cut. And I looked over the weekend at your school district budget, and it's hard looking at that budget to say, well, what could we possibly cut, right? Because we're not going to cut off the water in the schools. There's a line item for water. We're not going to fire all the teachers. That's what we're here for. So where do you find savings? Generally, the places where you find savings in every unit of the public sector is not in the budget. Because basically, if it was budgeted, you've probably already figured out how to save money on it. It's the stuff that you're not budgeting. And when I was sitting out here, I thought of one example. Actually, you came up with one example of the kind of thing that we would look at. And I was thinking of one other one that is different from the one that I had mentioned in the Philadelphia presentation. And part of the whole point of the process is to talk to as many people as possible. This isn't about know-it-all consultants coming in, although I'd like to think we know something about these operations because we've done this all over the country. But it's really important, however you do a process like this, to talk to everybody who's involved, from the janitors and the coaches to the teachers to the people at this table to everybody out in the audience. And any good process involves teachers, involves parents, involves community in finding ways to save money. And I'll give you an example. The very first performance review like this that was ever done, and we've basically replicated the process that was done here, was the Texas Performance Review, which is in 1991. And Texas was facing $1 billion deficit. They started this process that actually closed that budget gap, and then they've repeated it every year since then for almost 30 years now, and they find additional savings every year. The Texas process was copied by the National Performance Review under President Clinton, the Vice President Gore led, and then we picked up some of the people from those reviews and the general process, and over the period of the last 15 years have kind of refined that process. But, the key element is to look beyond the budget itself and to look at processes and, virtually everything about operations that you haven't thought of where you could potentially save money. And part of that is talking to the workforce and talking to the community, because everybody has ideas about how to save money, and it turns out that plenty of them are really good ideas. And the small example I want to give you is in the original Texas Performance Review. Besides talking to the entire state workforce, they opened up a phone line that people could call in and make suggestions about how to save money. There was one person who called in and left an idea that was one of these small, brilliant things that you put them all together, and it's how you wind up saving money in ways you wouldn't have thought of. The suggestion, and this turned out to save hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in state government operations, was in every state government building, on every floor of that building, there's a big drink machine like the one sitting there in the back of the room. And this one's actually a bad example of it because you've got all of the drinks on display. Most of these things, you've all seen the Coke machines where the functional area that you use is pretty small, right? You stick in your money, you push a button, the bottles come out. The bulk of these drink machines is usually a big plastic, like larger-than-life Coke bottle that's 5 feet tall and it's lit up so it's really juicy and it makes you want to buy a Coke. Behind that big juicy Coke bottle, there's a little light bulb. And when you take all the Coke machines throughout all the floors of every state office building in Texas, there are hundreds of thousands of little light bulbs that are consuming electricity every day for no purpose other than to make the Coke bottle look really juicy and get people to buy more Cokes. There's one citizen called in and suggested just unscrew the light bulb and it'll save electricity. Sounds like a really small thing, and it is a really small thing, but that saved a wastage of hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you put together 100 recommendations like that, and you wind up saving large amounts of money. In our experience, reviews like this, everything isn't just unscrew the light bulb, but through a lot of simple steps like that aren't budgeted for. There's no budget for the amount of money that's being spent on lighting up Coke bottles. An example that I talked about in the talk I gave in Philadelphia was we did a review of the West Virginia state government. They had a $2 billion state budget. Out of that, we saved them about $4 million a year on road salt because the salt spreaders on the snowplows were putting too much salt on the road when it snowed. By simply calibrating the machines properly so they put the right amount of salt on the road, they saved $4 million a year. You do a lot of small things like that, it adds up to a large amount of money. In our experience in state governments, you can save about 5% in annual operating costs. As I said, it's a little bit more difficult in schools because so much of your money is actually going into personnel and in service delivery, not into items like that where you can find savings. But from small things to big things, you put them all together, and for school districts this size, as I got in this presentation and the email that the chair shared with you, we think in general you can look at about a 3.5% saving on your budget. And those are savings that recur year after year after year. It's not a budget gimmick and then next year you're looking how to fill that hole. It's things that you can do that make the operations more efficient and that save money year after year after year. So basically, put those things together, and you have what end up being large-scale savings from looking at small operational items. That's everything from your bus routing software to how you operate your lunch line to the delivery of professional development and purchasing of supplies and materials for the classroom, all those sorts of things. If you look at those comprehensively, you go through with a fine-tooth comb, you can wind up saving the money, as I said, it comes to, in this district, we would hope for savings of a little over $2 million a year in operational savings that are things that nobody will miss. This isn't throwing out programs that people care about. This isn't taking away the SMILE program, and it's not about laying off teachers. In fact, we've been brought in various places by the union to help do this, because I think, if you do this right, your workforce recognizes this isn't about let's bring in a bunch of people to figure out, like in a corporate takeover, how we can make money by laying people off. This is about how can we eliminate things like the lit-up Coke display or the salt spreaders or other things that we're doing inefficiently. The problem that you mentioned earlier about the build-up in unpaid lunch bills that you have. That's the kind of problem that we would want to tackle through a review like this and help you save money. And you put enough things like that together, and you're talking about significant savings. The one other thing I'll say, and then I'll stop talking, just open up to any questions that anybody wants to ask me, is more and more in recent years, obviously, as the fiscal situation has decayed across the country, the one question that I always get asked is, can you do this on a contingency? Can you do this on a pay-for-performance basis? And I'll tell you, I have always said yes to that, and no one has ever taken us up on it. And the reason is because when you get into the details of the conversation, it turns out that, we're going to wind up saving many times what it is that we're paid, and the clients usually just give up and say, we'll just cut you a check because it's just not worth the hassle of going through the pay-for-performance process. But are we willing to do that? Yes, because I think that we should be willing to say that, if we're not saving you money, you shouldn't be paying for it. There are other consulting firms that I've seen, and not so much in the school level, but at the state level, where they've been paid millions of dollars and have saved the state less than what they were paid. We've never done that. I don't want to do that. I don't think that's a good way to operate. And we're a small business. The ones who do that tend to be very, very large businesses, and they're going to get hired the next time anyway, regardless of how they perform, because they've got a brand name. I'm only as good as my last client. So our goal is to leave the client happy, and I don't think that having you pay more than we save you is a good way to have you be happy or get a good recommendation out of you. So we're always willing to do things on a contingency. Now, the difficulty, and I talked about this a little bit in the email that I sent to the chair and described more in this handout I have for you, figuring out exactly how to make this work for you, because you're a very small district, and with the average state government, we're going to save them hundreds of millions to billions of dollars, so I can pretty much guarantee them they're going to save 1,000 times what they're paying us. I can't guarantee you I'm going to save you 1,000 times what you would pay us, because you don't have 1,000 times more to pay us, unfortunately, or you don't have that much in your budget. But what we can do, I've got a proposal for you that's essentially in staged steps, so that basically it protects everybody in this financially. But what I would basically propose is that we would go in $100,000 savings increments. And if we don't save you $100,000, you don't pay a penny. If we do save you $100,000, it's going to cost $40,000 for the first one to get there. So you've at least got a 2.5 to 1 return on your money. It would be 250% return, in other words, within the first couple of weeks of doing this. And we progress in that way so that you're never paying for a consultant, not only not more than what you're saving, but you're never saving less than 250% of what you paid. As I said, I think that in a district this size, it's possible to hit a $3 million savings amount, which would be 5%, which what we generally do at the state government level. I think that a realistic figure here is about $2 million. This would be annually recurring savings. But we want to guarantee you that in no case are you saving less than 250% of what you've paid at any stage in the process. So it would get a little bit more complicated to explain that, and it's probably better to go through on paper. But the bottom line is, one, we want to make sure that anything we do to help you involves you saving money, and then that you're assured you're saving money. Two, the way to save money is not to look through the budget of what are we going to have to sacrifice, what are we going to have to throw away that we really don't want to. It's to look at processes and operations and ways that you can do things slightly better than you're doing them now. You put a lot of things like that together, and you wind up saving money that enables you to preserve all the programs that everybody here is interested in preserving. And at the same time, you're making ends meet in the way you want to make ends meet so that you can do the other things with your money that you want to be doing. That's, I guess, a rough outline of what we do and how we do it, and I'm happy to go into however much more detail anybody would like.
So I'd like to jump right in. Hi.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I couldn't figure out who was talking.
So when you say, you find the savings, we kind of come up with a form of payment based on that. Are you saying you find $100,000 worth of savings, and we say, yeah, that's doable, viable, great, and then we pay you, sort of thing, or is it like you're finding the savings, whether or not we decide to execute it, you're going to get paid, right?
Well, yes and no. I suppose that at the end of the day, you could decide we're not going to do it after you've decided to do it. But this is not, we're going to come up with a report and say, you know what, if you close the cafeteria, you'll save $1 million. And you think that's a bunch of malarkey, but you're stuck paying a percentage of that. That's not how we operate. Part of the process is designed to build consensus, to have the people who are actually going to be doing the implementing agreeing that this is doable and that it's a good idea. To have everybody here agreeing that it's a good idea. We put things through several steps, some of which we call toll gates, because the ideas all have to stop and be vetted by all of you. And ultimately, at the end of the day, there's nothing that winds up in our reports that you don't agree is going to work, that the superintendent and the CFO don't agree is going to work, that the people on the lunch line or in the classroom who actually have to do it to make it work don't agree that it's going to work. Everybody has signed off that these are things that are going to work. If that weren't true, I could issue reports that are going to say 50% of the budget instead of 5% of the budget. And there are consulting firms that do that. But, as I said, I don't think that's a workable business model for a small consulting firm, because the press is going to come back to you a year or two later and say, how come you didn't save the $50 million that your consultant said and you look bad? Well, if you look bad, we look bad, and that's to me, not a good business model. What I want to have is 100% implementation of our recommendations, and we're pretty close to that. I mean, it says somewhere between 97 and 99%, because anything that's outlandish or that's too much money, or that, I'll put this more in the context of state government than you folks, because I'm sure you would never say anything like this, but, we've had things where a governor will say, that sounds like a really good idea, but the major facility that you're talking about on that is in the home district of the Speaker of the House, and if I cut that out, he'd be really mad at me, and if there's an election coming up next year, let's just let that one slide. Well, then we'll let that one slide. There's nothing in the report that everybody doesn't sign off on and say, that is actually a good idea, and it's going to work. And in terms of the numbers, we don't make these numbers up. There's a lot of work that goes into them, and you'll see in the handout here, we have fairly detailed financial projections, and we project over 5 years, because it's very important that something is not just a one-year saving and then, and then it's nonsense after that. This is something that has to be a real long-term saving. But we work on that with the CFO's office. We don't put a number into our reports that your financial people don't look at and say, no, you're right, it actually will save that much money. So once everybody has signed off and agrees that, yes, A, we're going to do this, B, it's going to work, and C, this is how much it's going to save, that's the basis on which the savings are computed.
And so you also said that you wouldn't present us with, cutting anything, You wouldn't present us with cutting things. You're saying that you don't want to look at the budget and think about cutting things.
Well, no. I mean, you are going to cut things in a sense, but going in with a mentality that the way to save money is cutting things, as I said, is usually not a healthy way to approach it. You'll see in the presentation, and I'll bore the folks who heard this before, but this is my favorite part of the presentation anyway. The best explanation of this that I found is there was this old cartoon in the New Yorker, and I've got a different version of it in here because you can't get the original. But it had a family around a kitchen table, and the father's saying to the kids, because of the recession, we're going to have to let 2 of you go. And that's actually how most public sector entities approach budgeting. There's a recession where our funds are tight, so let's get out the list of what our cost centers are and figure out what we've got to jettison. But, none of you, no real human being would ever do that and how they figure out their budget. The guides for how you save money, if you really need to save money, are people like Susie Ormond who, have written lengthy books about how is a family going to make its budget balanced. Well, it's not by sending one of the kids packing because you can't afford them any longer. It's 100 little things, like the kind of thing that I was talking about. In the context of a family, the equivalent of that is to bulk buy your food when you go to the supermarket, to buy high deductible insurance policies. You save your change. You turn off the lights and the TV when you leave the room. It saves $500 off your electric bill and so forth. You do 100 things like that. You save the cost of a kid over the course of a year instead of getting rid of the kid. You can think of that as a cut. You're going to cut your electric bill. But the idea is to cut your electric bill by turning off the lights when you leave the room rather than saying we can't afford the SMILE program any longer.
Right. So would you say, though, that you might, most of our budget is operational and it's in our staffing. So would you look at programs or something and say, well, actually, this could be run more efficiently. You might need 8 positions instead of 11 or something.
Yes, it's possible that you wind up saying that. The goal is not to look for places that you can fire people. In fact, the bulk of the places where we've done these reviews, we have had explicit direction from the chief executive that I want no layoffs, I don't want to fire people. And as I've said, we have been brought in by the union to do this as a way of, in the case of Chicago, is explicitly to counter the mayor's moves to cut the budget by firing people, and they wanted to find ways you could save money by not firing people. So, yes, in most places the goal is to do this without eliminating positions. And it may be that you look at a certain function and say, you actually operate the lunch line with 5 people instead of 6 people, so you don't need that. But very often there are other functions where you need additional people, so you be shifting positions around or so forth. But we've actually done these with no net position losses because that was the goal of the administration, and it's possible to do that. And of course, people say, well, how can you do that when 75% of our budget is in personnel? One of the things that's clearly a major cost center for yours, and you've probably looked at this to some degree, but I would want to focus on this because it jumps out looking at your budget. Like every place else, your healthcare costs are high, and they've really gone through the roof in recent years. The idea there, the equivalent is, you don't want to just go in and give people worse health insurance, but there are ways to give people what's effectively better health insurance at a lower cost because you structure it differently and do it more intelligently. So there's ways to save money even there. But the goal is not to cut the things that people care about, which in the context of the school is obviously education. And it's not to save money on the school buses by making more kids walk to school. It's by doing your school bus routing more efficiently. We've had issues around the hours that the school bus workers work and how they're assigned and what you do with them in between the morning and the afternoon routes and so forth. There are ways to do that wind up using your personnel more efficiently and that save you money. So that's the goal.
Have you done any work where you were working with both the school district and the municipality at the same time?
I don't think so. I mean, we've worked with municipalities and we've worked with school districts.
Okay.
I think it's a particular thing in the Northeast to integrate the the school district budgets with the, with local government approval. I don't think that's done so much in the South and the West, where we've done the bulk of our work on this. But, we've done overlapping governments simultaneously and that sort of thing. I mean, I'm not sure what you want to get at it there, but the bottom line is we've done municipalities, we've done school districts. I don't think we've done any in tandem.
Yeah, I was just thinking, the overall goal sounds like something that would be useful at the town level and the school district level here.
Yeah, well, I agree, and I think you could use it at the state level, and I've been lobbying the governor's office on that for a long time. They did a slimmed-down version of that when Governor Raimondo was first elected, so that has been done at the state level.
How long does the process take once you start?
Ideally, we'd like to take 6 months. We've actually done it as short as 3.5 months, which turned out to be, I guess, a very pleasant experience for the client because that's what they wanted. It was less fun for us because it started as a 6-month process, and about halfway through, we were told the governor actually wants this in like a month. So that involved a lot of pulling our hair out, but it can be done. In the ideal world, I think we would restructure this somewhat for you, as I said, because in order to make sure that we're progressing in a way that is saving you money at every step, I want to do it slightly differently. But in general, you can think of it as kind of 2 months of overview to get at a basic idea of what are the most likely targets for saving money, and in very rough terms, what would be the dollar amounts we're looking at. About another 2 months to get to the kind of weeding out process we discussed, where some ideas lead to additional ideas, some ideas don't pan out, some sound perfectly good, but you don't want to do them for whatever reason, and that kind of weeding out and getting to the point where, having worked it through with the financial people, that we've got hard numbers that we feel pretty certain about, that takes about another 2 months. So it's about 4 months to get to the process where you could actually implement the whole thing. We then like to do a pretty detailed write-up for public review so that everybody understands the rationale for any recommendation, comparatives on other districts where a similar sort of thing has been done, details on how the financial savings were arrived at, and so forth. Doing a good report like that takes 2 months in itself, just to dot every I and cross every T. But you could actually implement some of the savings starting almost immediately. The salt spreader example that I gave in West Virginia, they liked it so much they didn't even wait for us to write it up. They ran a test on it and found it was actually saving more money than we projected, and so the governor ordered it immediately because the snow season was coming on. Which is one other point I want to mention. There's a thing on this, a slide on this in the papers that I'll give you. There are 2 states that went back after we did one of these reviews and did a review of the review a year later and then 2 years later to look at what were the savings relative to what we said. And in both cases, the amount that the state saved was actually higher than the amount that we said they were going to save. And that's pretty much intentional because, as I said, my goal isn't to come in and tell you you're going to save $30 million and then you save 3 and, I look terrible, but who cares? I've left and you're stuck with the problem. My goal is to tell you this is how much we realistically think we can save, and then you save more and everybody's happy. So that's how I prefer to operate. So our projections are pretty conservative.
How do you go about listening feedback from community members? It's obviously easy. We're kind of a captive audience. Our administrators, our school personnel, kind of captive audience. But how do you get to engage the community?
Well, there's a number of ways to do it. Certainly in a community that's this small, you can have a public meeting like this, and we could spend... Well, no, I realize that, but I've been... Nothing against South Kingstown. I've been to bigger cities than South Kingstown, so my guess is that we could do a lot of community outreach here relatively easily. But methods for doing that are obviously public meetings. As I mentioned, in Texas and various other places, we've set up a call-in number. Phones are getting kind of passé, and mostly this is done on websites nowadays where people can go online and make suggestions anonymously, or they can leave contact info if they want. In the case of the employees of the district, we've got an electronic survey method that lets a survey go out to every single employee. And we've generally gotten a 50% response rate on these surveys because people actually like being asked their opinion on how things can be done better. I mentioned in Philadelphia that my general theory of government is that every public employee goes to work every day thinking, my boss is an idiot, and if anybody asked me, I could tell you how to run this place better. And most employees actually do know how to run their unit somewhat better because they've been doing it for 10 years and they know the salt spreaders could be calibrated better. They're the ones who have these ideas like that. Asking people, how would you do your job better, is actually the best way to get ideas. And obviously we've got some notion of where to look because we've done this around the country, but you're not doing your job if you're not talking to people, and that's important for two reasons. One is everybody in this room has some idea of how this school district can function better, and they want it to function better. If we're not talking to everybody here and everybody that you're employing and everybody that's associated with the district in some fashion, we're not doing our job as consultants trying to help you figure out what's the best thing you can do. But at the end of the day, obviously we'll be gone someday, but your teaching staff will be here hopefully for a long, long time, and they and your administrative staff, your custodial staff, your drivers, everybody who's dealing with your students, they need to be bought into the process. They need to believe that this is going to work, that this isn't a gimmick, and that their views have been solicited, they've been listened to, and that we and you have learned from them. Because not only will they then contribute things that help you, but they're the ones who ultimately wind up implementing it. And that's how you get from having a report that sits on a desk and doesn't amount to anything to something that actually has, at the end of the day, we'll draw up the implementation plans, and those are done in conjunction with the financial people and with the people on the line who are really doing the implementing. But you can have all the detailed plans in the world, if people actually don't do it, you don't save the money, it doesn't get done. By bringing people into the process and including them, there's people in the community, people who work in the schools, people who work in the back office, that's how you make sure that the savings actually get implemented.
I have a question for Kristen. While you've been here, have you entertained anything like this, like an efficiency review or?
So I was asked that by Emily and the chair. We have done what I would call silos of this work. So we've done a energy audit, and so we did that in concert with the town, and we were able to swap out all the older light bulbs and bring in a schedule of maintenance that realized, I think it was, it was very early in my tenure the first time it happened, so I would say a very large sum of money. Do you want to?
Yeah, and we just had another energy study just completed in the last week or so, again, working with the town. We have not seen that report as of yet. I do anticipate it in the next couple of weeks, but we are working with the town on that. So Kristen's right. We've done different things in silos.
We also, Mr. Alfred, the former town manager, had put forth very early in Mary Ann's career an entire overhaul view. I don't know if it's the exact same process that you did, and it had to do a lot with energy, with technology. It didn't have to do with personnel per se, but Doug Snow was very, very involved, as was our maintenance director, and John Rashat, the former CFO. It was declined in the end by Mr. Alfred because of an uncertainty about the upfront costs and the wonder of the benefit for town and school. But I am hesitant to say it was similar. I think this is different than anything that we've been shown before.
Do you have comments or questions? So I will say I also reached out to Andrew just to get some specifics on if this is what we want. I mean, to me, the session that we went to was called Death by 1,000 Cuts. I think is what it was.
I think it was savings by 1,000 cuts.
Savings by 1,000 cuts. No, well, see, I thought the idea was that, like,
we're not really
when you're just
pushing
looking
down.
at, like, things to cut, like, big things that are, like, this is a $30,000 item, let's cut that because it's more glaring. But it's like the death of your mission, kind of, when you look at it that way. And, I don't know, I also think that it could impact morale to involve faculty and staff in the improvement plans and the community, and I would like to see if there are ways to also engage particularly the community members that aren't really able to show up to all these meetings, if we can, like, have community outreach into some of the neighborhoods that are underrepresented. But particularly, you know, there's a facility plan, there's extreme budget reductions, where you have a lot of contract negotiations this year. And at the same time, we're seeing similar challenges at the town level where they're, like, under a ceiling that they're, to some extent, struggling to meet. So I would really like to see us do something like this. My only question is basically for Andrew, like, how you go about it. How you go about
the contract, the payment, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a really exciting idea. I don't really think that we can afford not to try it. It's something different that hasn't been done. I think a lot of people in this community have a lot of ideas about how we can save money. We've had transportation subcommittee meetings for I don't know how many years now, but we haven't been able to bring that $4.5 million number down. So to have somebody with a different lens who does this nationally around the country and actually, I believe, internationally, that is coming in with a new look at this. I think that we could start to really move forward in solving some of these issues that we're talking about meeting after meeting after meeting, instead of continuing to meet about the issues that we know we have. So lucky for you, we have a lot of community members that have a lot of ideas, and so let's get them into a plan, an actionable plan. I think that it's really exciting. So thank you so much for taking time to come and explain what you do.
Invitation. So you want?
So we're going to actually kind of go off agenda quickly, not for too long, but give the opportunity for community members if they wanted to ask you some specific questions.
Sure.
Or it might, you know what, it might be better to just do it via email. Okay, so that's what we'll do. We'll post the presentation with your contact information on board docs. So we'll do it that way so that community members can reach out and ask questions. What?
Are you suggesting that we put Eric's info out before we've decided whether we hire him?
Well, I mean,
I'm not sure that's fair.
It's on the agenda. I mean, his company name is...
Yeah, I've discovered in this day and age, if somebody wants to find you, they can find you anywhere.
Right, on board docs. I mean, unless you would rather, I mean, I do think it's important for community members to be able to ask questions about, like, what...
Well, how quickly are we making a decision? Can't we... I assume it would be part of community comment for the next meeting, right? Or a vote has to happen. It's not happening right now. I see. If he's not here, we can't answer a question.
Right.
I see. Okay.
Does anybody in the audience have a question that they would like to ask? Well, there you have it. Yeah.
We don't have to release.
Okay, so thank you so much for joining us, and if you want to give us the handouts, and then if there is a motion at the table for...
Are we looking to make a decision right now, or what are we, I don't know
I
if
feel like
there's
we need
action.
some more info from Andrew. I think we could act on it right now.
You have the
Absolutely.
authority the way that you've advertised it to act on something.
I think maybe we wait to hear from Andrew about kind of how the payment sort of stuff is going to go. Yeah.
I would just hesitate at this point until we get an understanding of the bid law as relates to this particular project. That would be my only concern.
Sorry. My question was more so like the bid process, not so much like payment terms and things like that. So, okay, so I mean, we don't need a motion then at this meeting then.
But just note to the committee, maybe you could find the money to fund Smile if we started sooner than later.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, the timeliness of it is, time is of the essence because it does take time to do these things, and much of the communication that we would want someone like Eric and his team to do, like some of that needs to happen during the school year and some of it needs to happen in the summer, and so it isn't something that we want to just kind of push down the road. So that's why it was so wonderful that you were willing to be here on such short notice.
Sure, thanks. I mean, I don't want to be a high-pressure salesman or something, but it actually would be advantageous to do this while, to get started while school is in session, because then obviously, there's all kinds of obvious reasons why it'd be better to do it now than in July. But
yeah.
Yep.
I agree. So, I mean, we can put it on the next agenda.
Yep, and we'll get legal guidance from Andrew in the meantime of like how to post that. Okay. Cool.
One other thing I think you raised this, Stephanie, is I wonder if it would be valuable to talk to the town too and see if they want to enter into some kind of joint effort.
If I could comment on that, actually, I was thinking some during the back and forth that I said we've never done a joint township and school thing before, but there are lots of exercises like this in savings between multiple townships or multiple jurisdictions, because there are possible savings there. I thought of this particularly when the superintendent mentioned about having talked jointly with the township about energy savings. It would be there are potential savings that you could realize in conjunction with them that you're not going to realize separately. So, I mean, it would obviously, from a business perspective, I'd be happy to do that. But I think it actually winds up opening up opportunity to save you and the township money doing things together rather than doing things separately. That invariably finds more efficiencies than not.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to say don't partner with the town, but I wouldn't want to also wait. I mean, as we're sitting and listening, we're like 2 weeks or 1 week from finalizing the budget, and then we're moving with decisions, so we want to move. And I mean, as long as we can get Andrew's feedback in kind of as soon as possible, I would like to see us make a decision a little bit quicker than
waiting on the town. Maybe we can just set a great example that they will follow.
I wonder if we could make a decision tonight about pending discussion with Andrew to make sure that the bid process and contract is reviewed. Is this something that we want to move forward with as a body? That would seem to be, that would help us to then be able to move forward, because then the communication could happen with Andrew, with our admin team, with Eric and the chair, after we make it, so we know whether we're going forward with this or not. I don't know why we wouldn't move forward with this, as long as the contract was appropriate and the bid process was followed appropriately.
But it's not like we're going to save the money next year.
But you could.
Yeah, you could. It's like
you can save the money for next year. So some of the things that we cut that we know are...
No, I'm saying like you're not going to wait till next year for us to give you a check, right? Or is that how it goes? Like you find the savings, they actualize in our budget, and then we pay you?
Well, I'd say it's somewhere in between.
No, I mean, do you know what I mean? Like, do we have money in the budget right now to pay $40,000 for every $100,000 that you're going to find? You know what I mean?
It's not $40,000 for every $100,000.
No, so
by the way.
whatever it was, though.
Right.
I mean, Mary Ann, do you want to jump in on this at all, or?
Well, are you wondering, it sounds like what you're wondering is, do we write a check before the savings are realized?
Right, of course we do.
Can I jump?
Yeah. You have a fee, and your fee is based usually on the size of our district or our population or something, right?
Yeah, kind of.
Okay, and so then we contract with you, we pay said fee, and then you, in the spirit of what Ms. Collins is asking, then you, let's say your fee is $20. And you say, you're paying this $20, and over the course of the next 6 months, with all of your investigations, you find you can save us $100,000. Right? Is that the concept?
No, actually.
Okay,
It's
please tell us
closer to
about
what
that.
Ms. Collins was saying, I think. No, I'm not asking for an upfront payment. It would be more along the line, it's kind of half yes and no what you were saying. So you don't pay us anything immediately. We're going to come in and, let's say we agree that it's going to be $20 for every $100,000 in savings. So we would go to work and say, okay, we've come up with ways that we think it's going to save you $100,000. And when you all agree that, yes, this is something we want to implement, everybody says it's going to work. Ms. Crawford looked over our numbers and said, yeah, you know what, they originally thought this would be 120, but, I don't think so. I think it's 100. But, it's actually $100,000. Everybody agrees that's $100,000 in savings. Then we get our $20. Now, does that mean that you're getting, that you're going to have to wait for that $100,000 to come in and you're paying us 20 out of nowhere? That's the yes and no part. Some of that $100,000 is going to accrue over the course of a year. Some of it's actually going to accrue very quickly and I can't guarantee this, but my guess would be, given the ratio of the numbers we're talking about, the savings will be accruing fast enough that it's paying for the fee up front. But, you're not on the hook for the 20 until we save the 100. Then we're going to go on and save you another 100,000. You're going to pay us that 20. Out of that 100,000, some of that's showing up now, some of it's showing up over the next year, and then of course the savings recur year after year. So I guess in theory, could you have a cash flow problem, which I think is the issue you're getting to? And I suppose so, but it would be the first time that the consultant payments outrun the savings. I'm not here to rip you off whatever people think of consultants. As I said, I don't think that's a good business model. That can work for somebody big, but if we leave you in a bind, that's going to be the last job I ever do.
Mary Ann?
Yeah, can I just jump in? What I would suggest or recommend at this point is just, I think what I'm hearing from the school committee, that you are embracing this concept and would like to consider moving forward with the concept and working with this firm to do the audit, or what we're calling the audit. If it's okay with you, can you now just turn it over to myself and Andrew, Dr. Stringfellow, and maybe the chair, to finalize these details, because I think he's talking, I have a bunch of questions that I think I'm going to get lost in the shuffle, so I would recommend that we take this offline now. I think we understand clearly that you folks are very interested in this, and we can work with that, and granted, the next meeting is not until the 14th of May. We can do something sooner. So we can think about that.
I love special meetings.
But let us be. Let myself and Dr. Stringfellow, Andrew, and yes, thank you, and then we'll get back to you whether or not we think we need a special meeting or something like that.
Okay.
One more special meeting before Pauline leaves.
I'm trying to facilitate here, Dr. Stringfellow. Hold me up a little bit.
Thank you for synthesizing our thoughts.
I said it 30 minutes ago.
Yeah.
Thank you again.
Sure.
Very much appreciated.
I'll drop these with the superintendent,
Okay.
and there's almost enough for everybody, and you can make the extra copies.
Cool.
As you know, you can feel free to contact me with further questions, and I'll wait to hear from you, Ms. Crawford. All right?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. For
Enjoy your dinner out.
Yeah, I'm going to have to call and let them know I'm running late for dinner. Anyway, but thank you very much.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda is the Campus Safety Policy 8231 implementation considerations.
So a month or so ago, the chair and I met with the SK Immigration Task Force about the Campus Safety Policy, and really heard from them about the need for really proper implementation. And so I asked them to put something in writing, and they did, which is attached to this item on the agenda. But essentially, I think as we heard Tia Beckman say during community comment, there really is a need to just ensure that we have a holistic approach to implementation, and that we're both protecting student information and not and ensuring that the information for undocumented students doesn't get passed on to ICE, but that we're also doing sort of year-round updates, trainings for school staff and staff of the vendors that we work with, like the bus drivers, bus monitors. And so there's this really comprehensive list of suggestions from designating a person in each building that is responsible for implementing this policy to posting a notice in each office about the policy at schools. And so I wanted to bring this to the school committee. I think specifically it goes on to administration and to the leadership team to figure out which pieces of this are already happening. And even if I don't know if you want to give an update now about what's already happening, and then I thought there were some ideas that we might not have considered yet that came directly from the task force that could be helpful.
So all staff needs to know that the policy exists. The policy and procedure was shared with all staff at the beginning of the year's meeting by principals. Every building has a person responsible. The legal folks at the time suggested that the principal be responsible, and when the principal be out of the office, if they were ill or at a meeting, that they designate a person in charge. So that's already happened, number 2. I don't know that we have some sort of a statement in the front offices, but that is certainly something that we can discuss at leadership. The counselors knowing about the SAT option. Is this the SAT option? This is the directory information?
I think the directory information is an addition. I think the SAT is that you don't necessarily need to put all of your personal information. Like, that's a misnomer about, I'm
fairly certain that we know that already, but that is a good double check to share with the counselors. The SROs do know about the school policy, and they'd certainly know about the SK ordinance because it's a town policy that is being administered by the police chief, and so that's something that their folks are aware of. But we can certainly remind the SRO. Pauline, the principals have been trained, and Pauline has been in contact with Andrew Hennius, who's training front office staff. I think you've already got plans for, it's right after vacation. Training for anyone who's not a part of the permanent staff, so this is the vendors or the bus, is it the substitutes?
Yeah, I think it's both, right? It's the bus drivers, cafeteria employees, folks that aren't directly our employees, but then also, there are sometimes subs, and just knowing that I think substitutes know not to share information, but essentially I think the policy is contact the superintendent. They know that basic.
Yeah. I mean, we're not going to have a sub or a bus driver or any vendor turn over a kid to anybody without going through the principal of the building ever for any circumstances, but it's worth stating to them, and a brief video. I don't know who would have the video, but if they would forward that to us, then we can certainly share it with the staffing company that hires the substitutes and the bus driving company in Chartwells. And certainly when they do their new staff orientation, I'm sure they'd be very happy to share the video. And then you put in a trainer, and so yeah, I think with our next step, unless you have any questions or concerns about these, our next step would be to share this with the principals at leadership.
No, that sounds great, and thank you. I think it's helpful to get an update on the policy and how much is being done or needs to be done. And thank you to the task force, because I think this is a really important issue to protect vulnerable population of students, undocumented students. So I think some of you are here. Thank you for doing that.
Yes, thank you so much for your efforts. We're very appreciative.
Okay. Any committee comments on that? Questions? No? Okay.
Madam Chair, I'm
yes.
going to recuse myself.
Oh, yes, okay. So I think we actually have to go to D first in just kind of getting feedback from Andrew is that we would reorder it, that you have to do, that we need to discuss the proposed amendment to the PAT policy, mainly because we do have to discuss and vote to suspend the bylaws in lieu of a first reading. And so bylaws 9.3 is that the school committee can ask to suspend its typical policy process due to a new MOA being in the best interest of the district. So that's why we would be doing that, and just from a process standpoint, we need to do D first. So let's see. So first thing, in open session, we have to review any issues we have with existing policy 5425. I just want to make sure that I'm following this specifically as Andrew has considered we should. So, this is a time to kind of discuss any issues we have with the existing policy. So the bylaws being that it needs a first and second reading. So under the bylaws 9.3, you can suspend the need for the first and second reading, and basically just to have this one agenda item in lieu.
I just wanted to make sure. Did you vote that? Did you say you were going to vote that first? I wanted to capture
That's what we need to do, yes. But I'm just kind of following his specific instructions. He says, in open session, review your issues with policy 5425 as required by 9.2 of bylaws. And then we would ask school committee to suspend its typical policy process due to the new MOA being in the best interest of the district. So let's go, just to keep things smooth, maybe we could just go down the line, and if anybody has anything they want to say. Alicia, do you want to start?
Sure. So,
Can I get some clarification before we start?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Are we talking about suspending the bylaws, or are we talking about
It's basically like a three-part.
Right. So part one is.
Part one, actually, it's a four-part. Part one is, in open session, review your issues with policy 5425, like the existing policy. So in order to make a policy change, before we would either do the first reading or the second reading, or choose to suspend that first and second reading, we are required to review the current policy. Okay. Do you have anything about the current policy, or no?
I'm interested to hear what other people have to say. So not yet.
No. Okay. No? Okay. So at this point, is there a motion to suspend current typical policy process due to a new proposed MOA being in the best interest of the district? So this is just to eliminate the first and second reading. Well, this is, in order to even consider changing the policy, we've heard, it's clear to me that we've heard.
I didn't realize that's what you were asking us for our first go of it. Okay.
Yeah.
So what the issues are with the policy.
Like, why are we even considering the change? Yeah. That's why I was a little surprised that nobody had anything to say.
This policy is something that I hear probably the most about, and it's not just from educators, it's from parents who sort of see the impact, parents that volunteer in our schools and stuff like that, that it's not working. There is like kind of this sort of frenzy around this time of year, every year, people not knowing where they're going, or whether they're coming or going. And so it's just something that we hear a lot about from teachers, and I've heard it certainly from people who volunteer in the school. And so, for me, I didn't really understand why we had the policy, so I've heard, several times from our administrators, and some of the reasons are compelling, kind of, if you look at it, on paper, like where children come first and stuff like that, but it's like not actually how it ultimately ends up playing out. And so, so for me, I just sort of looked around at what other districts were doing, and I guess I had heard from the administration, we have to have this policy because of the BEP, like we're sort of legally bound to it, but then seeing other districts doing it differently, and it seems to be working well for their administrators and for teachers, it seemed like it was a reasonable thing for us to revisit.
So, I'm sorry, when you had asked for comment, now we're going down the line again? Okay.
I'll go last.
So I agree that over the years we've heard there's been many opinions from all sorts of different facets of our community with the current wording or implementation of the PAT policy. What I have not heard are specifics and kind of really concrete, kind of almost like data around it. And what I also know is that just today, going through North Kingstown, East Greenwich, Barrington, very much kind of a list of what Mr. Nelson read out, that they all do have PAT policies, right? But they're different, and a lot of them do reflect back to the BEP, as does ours. I'm not suggesting that ours is perfect and shouldn't be updated. I'm just wondering the speed at which we're trying to do this, the urgency of it for the evening. That makes me hesitate and is a little bit concerning. I've gotten a lot of feedback just in the past 2 days from teachers who were like, what is happening? Why is this suddenly being voted on where it hasn't been vetted? So while I agree there's problems, and I'm sure everybody would agree that it could be updated and tweaked, I think the way that we are going about it right now is making people, as equally as people are afraid to come to the microphone to speak of the problems, of the current policy, the people I communicated with in the past 2 days are equally as afraid to come up to the microphone to go against what is being proposed for tonight. So there's a whole lot of scenarios that I'm uncomfortable with, a lot of what's happening around it, but not to take away from the fact that the policy should be updated. Mm-hmm. I think it should be the way we go about doing it should be a little bit more transparent, accountable, the whole 9 yards.
So for many, many years, I have heard from teachers, volunteers, just sort of echo what everybody else has said, that the current policy is not working because it instills fear, and it's not working. Sort of to be able to make a change for this year and going forward, I feel like that's an important step into increasing what we know is a problem in SK, and that is decreased teacher morale. So if we can do something to address that on a holistic level, I think that is something that we should be moving forward with quickly. I don't think that this is, a knee-jerk or that we're moving forward too quickly with it, because it has been being discussed since the fall. So in the fall, a survey was sent out to the teachers, and this process came out as one of the most important things to address in the immediate future. And since then, Mary Barden has been working with the school committee and the district attorneys to come up with an agreement that makes sense for our administrators and also for our teachers. And I think putting the kids at the forefront is always essential. And if teachers have a voice in terms of where they're going to be, what placement they're going to have, then you're always going to be more invested. I can speak just as an example for myself. If I was taken from teaching maternal and neonatal health and I was put into teaching pediatrics, that I would not be as invested in my students. I would do my best. I would make sure my students were learning, and I would go in every day as enthusiastic as I could, but that area is not what I'm most passionate about. So if teachers can have some say as to where they go to make sure that they're in an area where they're most passionate about, I think that your students are always going to come out on the better end. So in terms of what our high school administrators came forward and are concerned about, I do think that's something that we really need to be paying attention to. That's very valuable information to have. And I think that we need to be sure that we're moving forward with a process where we're not losing teachers that have an area of specialty that can't be replaced. And to me, when I've asked questions about this, it didn't sound like that was going to be an issue, because that was something, you always have teachers that specialize in one area, and you need those teachers to be in that placement. So that's something that I had questioned before, and the answers that I got, and I was assured that wasn't an issue. So I don't want to belittle that point at all, because I think that's really, really important. So if anybody else could speak to that, or if maybe we could bring...
I guess
I think that's an important point. I don't want to overlook that, but
right.
I felt like I was sort of reassured that wasn't going to be an issue, so... So I had asked the... union reps about about making sure that we weren't going to be, that wasn't going to be an issue. And then the other thing is, I believe that Stephanie had talked to Andrew.
Yeah. Do you want me to?
Yeah. If you could just.
So I disagree that any of this is rushed. It's just that if something is we don't post something on an agenda that's like, a month from now, everybody get ready, we're going to talk about this. Like, it is posted when it's going to be a matter of discussion or action. And it did come up last fall, and I think it's come up routinely in recent years, and we've been requesting and reviewing sample documentation from neighboring districts definitely since December or before. Why I feel comfort in this and I feel confident in it is that it essentially is mirroring what North Kingstown uses. And so we looked at Warwick, Bristol Warren, North Kingstown, and others as examples that comply with the law but were bargained for the respective unions. Mary Barden has firsthand knowledge of the North Kingstown language, as does Andrew Hennius from a legal perspective. Andrew reached out to the North Kingstown superintendent and asked him for feedback from his senior administrator perspective on that contract language, and he said that he felt that the language worked and agreed that there had been no grievances related to it. So, we've reviewed it through a legal lens. We have reviewed it through an educator lens. It complies with the mandates of the BEP and state law. And I think it strikes a good balance in what we're looking for. And I think it, again, like most of what I heard about the importance of keeping it in this school policy and keeping this, like, very early edition of the PAT policy that aligned with BEP, it all boiled down to the word control that was mentioned so many times. And I just don't think that's a collaborative word that should be driving policy that has to do with our educators. So that's my feeling on it.
So I agree that all policy ultimately at some point needs review, and sorry. I agree that policy needs to come up for review with possible revision. But I also agree with Kate that, suspending the first reading doesn't allow time for this kind of discussion that we're having tonight, and then some, thoughtful process afterwards. It looks like this is, let's suspend the first reading and let's look at this tonight, discuss it, and vote on it, and it's a policy. And I have, I said this before, I have problems rolling this into the collective bargaining agreement. I have absolutely no problems discussing this as a school committee policy, implementing change in that policy, but I don't want to see it as part of the collective bargaining agreement.
When I refer to the rushing of it, I'll kind of back up what Michelle's saying is suspending of the bylaws. That I don't understand what the purpose of doing that now, other than everybody here has already made a decision. We're just going to vote, and it's going to be 5-2, and that's going to be the end of it. So that's that's kind of the sense. Like I feel like we've made a lot of progress in being able to work together as a group, and I feel like by suspending, by going out of process, knowing we have two very distinct, different, input here, where we have someone saying that it is going to impact some of our programs, our CTE programs specifically, which is a huge issue. And then we have someone else saying, well, no, that's not true. Well, I don't know which of those answers is accurate. So what I would love is for the administrators are the ones who know, and we have them with us. So I would like to maybe suggest that we do get some feedback from them as to, what could be and it would be an unintended consequence. It wouldn't be anything we're trying to do. But I would hate to move so quickly, suspend our bylaws, vote it in, and then have people go, whoops, and then it's in, and we can't do anything about it.
So it's an important, so it's kind of keeping, like Dr. Stringfellow even said, like last month, she's like, we are getting started on that process. Like, it's important to them.
Yeah.
And I just pulled up, I'm not going to say for sure what North Kingstown's budget has been like as far as budget reductions or layoffs, but I mean, they have the Academy of Engineering and Robotics, the Academy of Business and Finance, the Academy of Information Technology and Computer Science, the Academy of Music Education. So they have at least 4 CTE pathways supported and endorsed by the Rhode Island Department of Education. So I mean, I can't say for sure, but I'm just saying that they have thriving, functional CTE pathways, and they are using this as their personal assignment transfer policy.
So I totally hear you about the disparities between the union leadership and the administrators, but this has been kind of in the works for a little while, and I feel like, certainly Kristen's aware of what the administrators shared, and has been part of the process to a degree, right? With, like, you could have weighed in, this information could have been shared sooner, with our legal counsel to say, wait a minute, this is going to jeopardize this career pathway or whatever. It's like we're at the meeting where we're going to approve the policy, and it kind of comes out like, whoop, wait a minute, this is the impact it's going to have. And I just wonder if something could have been, it could have been ironed out sooner, like, why is it being raised right now where we have different people saying different things?
No one saw this before Friday.
Did you say that I knew that they were going to stand up and speak about this?
No, not necessarily.
I did not know that they were going to stand up and speak about this.
So
we've not had a chance to weigh in. Is maybe
because I think that's the problem, because this came out Friday. What?
So I don't know what you're referring to specifically, but we have not had that conversation.
So did Kristen know that Andrew and the union leadership were working on this?
Yes.
Okay.
Last meeting, you advised that they were working on it. That's accurate.
This has been like in public discussion.
Right. And you're kind of, I mean,
for quite
I would
some
think
time.
you're kind of aware of like what goes into the career and technical certifications for teachers and whether this would, I mean, this could just be, it could be that.
Can I just interrupt for 1 second before we get like really derailed here? Let's just bring it back. So I'm hearing what Kate's concern is, and I'm wondering if maybe someone, either Brian or Mick, could let us know if it would be detrimental in any way, or if it is, would there be an issue with waiting until the next meeting so that we don't have to suspend the bylaws and go through the process 1, 2, 3? Could we just hear? Is that something that we could ask?
The reason for Andrew looking into whether that's possible is because of the timeline that Dr. Stringfellow is under. It was because it was like, do we have to go through? Because that puts you in May. That is why it says what's in the best interest of the district is that we have administrators that are trying to figure out what their teams are going to look like.
And so that's why it's happening now.
Job reductions. We've already been through that horrible process.
Mm-hmm.
It dictates what happens after the horrible process of job reductions. It's not the same thing.
Right.
It's just not.
So it's just, I guess we're kind of getting into like the accuracy of perspectives, and if the perspective of the, I guess, Kristen, do you think that passing this policy would impact those two particular classes like they were talking about earlier?
So if my understanding is correct, you're suspending Article A and B in the policy and putting this North Kingstown language in it. So what I think, I have not talked to them specifically about CTE, but one of the questions that would come to mind is that your personnel policy speaks to administrators, teacher assistants, and teachers. Before, a few hours ago, in my mind, I thought that it was in place of voluntary transfers, which is B, and so that has less of an effect on layoffs and a variety of other things. For the CTE, say it again, please. Right, because I mean, I do the layoffs, and so that part I know. I have been. I'm not sure going forward if that's your plan, but that has been what I've done here. Mm-hmm. It's not a fun job, but it is a piece of it. One of the questions I would like to have an opportunity to talk to Andrew or Mick or Brian or somebody about before I do that is this middle column about relevant experience and how in North Kingstown or wherever it's been used that has impacted who eventually gets placed back and who stays on layoff. That may affect the layoff list. I don't know enough about it to ask. I think what their question raises in my mind is typically folks with special training would be the only ones or a select few that would qualify for a position. So I would say their example, a literacy coach is another example, a math coach or interventionist is another example. Some of the teacher leadership positions that we've had over the past few years, what ends up happening is it's not the most senior person that would get the job, it's the most trained or qualified. And I don't know if that's what they're concerned about. When you play it out, the person who's doing that program is one of, I'm not going to try to personally identifiable, it's one of the least senior persons in that certification area. And so if I mean, nod or not nod, but if what they're saying is ordinarily the least senior get laid off, and then if that position, children choose it and it's still available, then the three of us would interview for that position or show credentials in some way. The person who's trained is going to get it, and you can go forward with that position. I would have to play out every scenario that we have with those teacher leader positions, but in a quick view, it looks likely that the most senior science person would get the position, and that it wouldn't matter if the person was trained or not. I think what they said is then the program doesn't run. I don't know how it works in North Kingstown. They may have a very senior member of their group in whatever certification that is, who does those programs. So if the most senior math teacher is teaching computer science, then that won't be affected. In our case, in a couple of scenarios, I think quickly of literacy coach, math interventionists, and CTE, there would be some question. And so I don't want to mislead you. I don't want to say anything
I think it's a good point that North Kingstown has the career and technical pathways, and it's seamless. There aren't any grievances or anything.
So again, we've had a lot of talk with Mary Barden along this, because it's something brand new for a lot of people. So we get a lot of feedback, and just want to kind of reiterate that it's separate from the layoff process. So the layoffs, as Kristen said, it's not a comfortable thing, but it is under this program. It's still her area. The PAT does not address that at all. Right? So in this situation with those jobs, those positions, that's that difficult decision that Kristen has the power. Let me back it up. Under the current PAT process, what exists right now, you have that position to decide whether or not those teachers stay, correct?
On the current PAT process, we lay off just by seniority, reverse seniority and certifications, and then we get back in through the interview with those qualifications. The questions that I have in this Article 5 vacancy transfer piece, number one, it says that folks who have been involuntarily transferred would be given preference for any vacancy. I wonder how that is going to affect the layoff. We don't keep track of that as a database. I'm certain that North Kingstown probably does. Then that middle piece of relevant experience. So let's say that I'm a kindergarten teacher, but I'm also certified in grade 6. And I'm displaced for some reason, then I would not lay them off. I would just displace them. There's nothing in here that speaks to displacement language, so I'm not sure where that fits. So I would want to, which I'm assuming would be the next step, is that I would talk to Andrew to find out what happens with displacements. What I wouldn't want to have happen is to lay off more. Because there's no room for displacement. I'm sure there's a logical and lovely answer to what that is, but it would be a question that I would have.
Yeah, so two thoughts. I think the one about the involuntary transfers, is that I don't remember it by letter, but is that the one that says they'd have preference, but for the identical position, correct? If it keeps going.
Item C says educators who have been involuntarily transferred other than for job performance shall be given preference for any vacancy that occurs in the identical position for which that teacher was involuntarily transferred. So let's say you were you weren't, but let's pretend. You were involuntarily transferred out of Wakefield Kindergarten. And now Wakefield Kindergarten is available to you again, and so you would have first preference over that. How does that what I would need to know is how does that fit in terms of when we make a displacement and layoff list as to not lay off a lot of people. And so ordinarily what would happen is knowing where you'd end up because of your seniority and your special certifications in the end, I'm able to displace a whole bunch of people, give them rounds of putting them back into positions before the PAT process even takes place. That's one of the worries that I have. I'm sure it can be explained.
Yeah, and I agree, and I think that's where you ended, I think, is the big piece. All of these layoffs and displacement are before the PAT process. The PAT process is for voluntary transfers. I think that we're mixing those. We've got two different situations going on here, and I think that's just to address where the high school administrators are. Again, the question is, would those teachers in those spots be laid off under the current situation, because nothing's going to change as far as layoffs go with the new PAT process?
Yes and no.
Can I ask, if nothing's going to change in the layoff process, why is it then so urgent to get this in place before the layoff process?
I think it's urgent because, well, it's not as much the layoff process as what comes afterwards. I think, again, I don't think there's the urgency. This has been a discussion since the beginning of the year. So I don't. You know what I mean? So I don't think that.
I agree with that, Pete. I agree. I'm not saying that this hasn't been discussed and hashed out,
gotcha.
But the idea of suspending bylaws to get this done tonight,
sure.
That's rushed, because we only just saw this Friday. I only just saw this Friday. I wasn't involved with the discussions prior to this. So, and they've only just seen this on Friday. And the teacher who called me hysterical yesterday had only seen this Sunday. So that's where I'm like, hold up, I don't understand. You're saying it's not impacting the layoff process, but we got to get this done before the layoff process, so it's none of it is the doctor.
No, not so much before the layoff process. I mean, I specifically talked with Dr. Stringfellow. She's like, so you're putting this on the agenda, like, because they were already starting the PAT process of like figuring out where things were going to go.
So this is the most complicated year that I have ever laid off and reorganized folks. And what I have communicated to the chair is that my preference would be that you wait until we're through this, do whatever it is that the parties agree to when we're sure we're not going to make a mistake. My biggest worry is that if again, I'm presuming I'm going to be the one that's going to be coordinating this, but you haven't said that yet. I want to make sure that no matter what happens, that I'm not making a very, very costly mistake because I don't understand it well enough. I'm hopeful that Andrew and whomever, Mary's always been very, very collaborative, will walk me through how ours marries this. Because pieces like, just for example, later on in the school committee agenda, you're going to ask me about administrators. This policy is for administrators, certified teachers, and certified teacher assistants. In putting this piece in, which appears to be just for teachers, in place of A and B, one of my questions is, is there any interview process for new people, a new administrator, a new teacher, when folks in our group don't have the certification? Because if you take A away, I wonder where that comes in. So there are some things that will need to be clarified for me, but I agree with Stephanie, you either have to do something right away or wait until September, in my view, or we're going to make a mistake.
Well, and that's my
And I'm
question.
worried about that.
Why are we not? We've suffered through this process for so long.
That's exactly right. We want to be done with it.
Well, why not September? Why not thoughtfully, as with everything else that we're looking at, where this whole year is, it's hard not to swear for me, so I'm like really trying hard to be politically correct here. We have so many things coming together at one time. Why are we adding one more piece to this completely complicated, convoluted, divisive year that we've had? Why
Because
can't
it's
it wait till
divisive and it's important to the teachers. That's why.
this one piece?
It's a good thing to do for the teachers. That's why. The teachers have been wanting
go
this for
horribly wrong.
And Kristen,
And it could go
and it's
horribly
not
wrong.
and through the legal lens.
So,
And the administrators could have weighed in with these concerns sooner than tonight.
But I saw this Friday. I haven't had time to completely digest it. And I'm going to vote to suspend the bylaws of the school committee. 6.5 years, we've not suspended the bylaws in 6.5 years. We've had countless policies that have come across this table in 6.5 years that we've had a first read, a discussion, maybe some modifications, maybe not, and then a second read and adoption. And so the statement is being made here, this is for the benefit of the teachers, but what about the teachers that are talking to us privately, crying? Because
It's on both
they're
sides.
afraid.
It's on both sides.
That's right. So why do we rush this? Why are we rushing this? And like I said, since Friday, I've read this about 5 times. I need to. I can't. I can't agree with suspending bylaws and voting on this tonight. Furthermore, and I'm going to be honest, Ms. Kaminsky, you said a little while ago that you had talked to a particular person and got information. I didn't write fast enough to capture everything you said, but that's an instance of Ms. Kaminsky getting information that the rest of us don't have privy to until when she made that statement a few minutes ago. Then we hear from Ms. Finkelstein and Mr. Mezzanotte that this, if we implement this the way it is, that it could impact the CTE programs. And we hear from Mr. Nelson and Mr. LaForte that this is necessary, but we also hear from other teachers who also will not come to the microphone. Just like Mr. Nelson says, you know, some of his teachers won't come to the microphone and talk about the impact of the current policy, and that's what he was elected to do for them. But there are teachers that won't talk to him because they're disagreeing with him, and they're concerned about this. And then there's the, you know, sound like I'm beating a dead horse, but I'm not voting to put this in the CBA.
Can we have Rob come up? Because I think he's been waiting to speak.
Thank you. I want to clear a couple of things up. As far as the CT, I cannot speak to North Kingstown's. I can speak to ours. The biomedical program, okay, is taught by a teacher right now who has received specialized 2 weeks of summer training through something called Project Lead the Way, is who we partnered with for the program. It is required to teach that program, that specific training. I understand that layoffs and PAT process are separate things. Based on the decisions that have been made at your level, which are obviously very difficult decisions about, you know, cuts and things of that sort, based on what my reading was of the policy, which I did see for the first time this weekend, the new one, I don't see a scenario where that particular program will not be impacted. And if that program is impacted because the teacher has not received the specific training, there wouldn't be an ability to deliver that program. So I understand, like, can be a desire to compare it to CTE programs in North Kingstown. I'm not saying all of our CTE programs will be affected by this. That's not the case. I'm saying that I was worried off the bat for that particular program.
Can you explain why?
Yes, because
you didn't.
Because the individual, okay, who is teaching that particular program, like I said, it's required if you're going to be running it that they receive specific training through this partnership that we made with Project Lead the Way. The individual who did that went through that process. We budgeted for it. He went through this very intensive training. He's slated, because he has the training, to be teaching the kids coming up from the 8th grade next year, the 48 kids who are coming up. we don't have monies for another person to be trained. We didn't budget for it because we knew we had one already. And so the reality is that that will be affected if that's mid.
But I don't understand how. I guess you're not explaining how it would be affected.
I can't speak too specifically about, but if we don't have an individual who is trained to deliver that curriculum, if we don't have an individual who's able to do that, we can't run the class.
But you're saying we do. Right. I don't see why this person's position is now in jeopardy based on this policy being passed. No, it's...
Because there's no exemption based on what you're considering. There's no exemption for anything like that. There's nothing that's in that matrix that we saw that showed that.
In short, the two differ in a variety of ways, but the big difference that Rob is referring to is that the North Kingstown one speaks of evaluation rating, relevant experience, and seniority. The personnel assignment team that you currently have puts in special training and qualifications. And so what he's saying is that, there would not be, I think the most accurate phrase is there would not be any sort of special exemption for someone who's more qualified with special training. And that would be in a number of courses, would be the worry.
I'm thinking of the one I'm speaking to right now. Again, I don't know. There might be other ones too at the middle level. I'm not sure. You know what I mean about like I know they have a feeder program that comes into our computer science, for example. I just know for that one is the one that to me, when I read this, that's the first one I thought of as being a concern.
Okay, so I just wonder if, first of all, I'd just like to speak to the fact that this PAT process has been, and policy has been being discussed since the fall, Michelle, and so in that time, I have asked many people across the district their opinions and what could come out of this and what the pros and cons are. So I think that every single person up at this table has the ability to do that.
That's your job as a
and that is not seeking special information. That is only for my own knowledge. And I know it to be a fact that school committee members do that about a number of issues. That's part of our job, is reaching out to the community and getting some feedback. So anyhow, what I think would make sense right now, seeing that it is about 10 o'clock, is clearly this is something that needs to be decided on in the immediate future in order to put this into effect. I think that this process needs to be evaluated and voted on in time to implement it for this coming year. I think that it would be irresponsible to move forward with the vote tonight without having these specific answers addressed, and we don't have legal here for advice, and so therefore, I know we don't like special meetings, but in this case, I think that time is of the essence. We will need a special meeting, but we cannot vote on it. It would be irresponsible for us to move forward with a vote tonight without talking to our legal representation and addressing Shivani and Rob's concerns to make sure that these programs would be protected. So since there is no language about exemption, maybe that's something that needs to be included. The rest of the policy I feel very comfortable with, and I too did receive calls from teachers that were panicked, saying they didn't want to go to union leadership or to anyone else because they didn't want to be a dissenting voice, but that they had questions, and in answering their questions, or directing them to the people that could answer their questions, they then called back and or texted me saying that they received the answers to their questions and they feel very comfortable moving forward with this. And those are people, I think probably similar, maybe not the same people, but saying, oh my gosh, you can't move forward with this because we have questions about X, Y, and Z. So
I think this still goes to the union for a vote, though. Like you still, like the MOA still has to be reviewed and voted. It doesn't happen like there's not like a light switch that goes off tonight. But I mean, I actually think the idea of an exemption is a bad idea, because I think it is just like a blanket statement that certain positions are going to be like exempt from this, and I just think that's a bad choice. I mean, I'm not done. So under B, where it says all postings shall include at a minimum a description of the position requirements, i.e. title, certification, grade level, etc. That coupled with the points for relevant experience, and in these specialty positions, relevant experience is the kicker. Relevant critical experience. Like, this stuff has been thought of. Essentially, most of this language has been in effect in North Kingstown for years. Like, we're going to get disagreement from the community. We're going to get disagreement from teachers. We still have to make choices. And the administrators have a very hard job to do. This has been discussed for a while. I don't think the idea of exemptions is a good idea. And I think that we need to move forward with the plan that our legal counsel vetted very thoroughly.
Yeah, and I would say that I was thinking the same thing. In the job description, you can put that you require the particular training that job entails, the 2 weeks training, whatever it was that you were talking about. So that automatically kind of narrows it down to these folks that are trained that we want to keep in this position.
Would it be an issue to move forward with planning to have a special meeting within the next week where it would give everybody a little bit more time, including our high school administration, to discuss this with Mary Barden and Andrew, to just feel reassured and plan that we are going to have a special meeting to just vote on this within the next week? That certainly should be enough time. And does that seem... But I just don't see I don't know why we couldn't plan a special meeting for within this next week so that our high school administrators feel comfortable with knowing that those programs would be protected, and know that this is not going on to another meeting. This would be a special meeting just to vote on this, ensuring that we have the appropriate language to protect those programs. I don't know why we wouldn't do anything other than that. I feel very comfortable with this process, with this. I think that it's a great move. I think it's moving our district in a great direction. So I don't know why we wouldn't wait 2 days to give our high school administrators just the confidence that that their programs that they've worked really hard on about this would be protected. I just think that seems like the right thing to do at this time. That's what I would support, is making sure that we have a date that a majority could attend and questions could be answered by our high school admin. That's really the only hang-up that I have. And then vote on this to move forward.
I would say we could open it up to other than just the high school admin. They just happen to be here. There are, I'm sure, other people who have bigger, who maybe they don't, but I would say we don't want to pinpoint.
Does anyone suggest that we manage getting district-wide feedback? That's why we have union representation in place. That's why we have a school committee table. That's why we have those things. I'm just confused because it has been vetted out, and we aren't really at liberty to say when we're able to meet. You all know that this is not something that happens that quickly, and to say that so what if we post it tomorrow and we're going to have a special meeting on Friday 2 days later? How in the world in the next 48 hours are we going to then say we have appropriately consulted the entire community? I just think
I don't think it's about consulting the entire community. I trust that our union representation is bringing forward a plan, and I know that Andrew and Mary have worked very hard and for a long time since the fall on this. So I trust that, and I trust this document is a good document moving forward. But what I think we really need to be cognizant of is that we are protecting the programs. And I think this language does it, but I can't say that 110% tonight, and I think that it's worth taking a day or two to check on that. We don't have anyone here to be able to let us know if that is 110%. So I don't see what harm it could do to get those questions answered and then move forward with a vote.
In all of my research of over the past couple of days, looking at all the different policies and different opinions on this, one of the things that I've highlighted in almost everything that I've read is it has to be clear that it's in the interest of the students, and that should be the primary factor in all staffing decisions regarding education service providers. And this is just, it's screaming at me that we're doing something positive, and I'm not trying to make light of that or take away from that, but the way it's being done.
Just explain, there's RIDE certification, right? So your bio teacher or your chemistry teacher. With the new CTE board regulations, there is just more than just that now. So we're looking at, for example, our biomed program. The teacher not only has to have their science certification for RIDE, but now they also have to have the Project Lead the Way certification, which is 2 weeks of training, 4 years in a row to get certified to be able to teach that. Computer science is an additional cert. There is no computer science certification by RIDE, so basically anybody can teach it, but you have to go to code.org training. So without that, you cannot teach computer science classes. That our students receive about 20 credits to URI, right? So that's very valuable for our students, which is why our computer science program is so popular. And a lot of 8th graders are signing up for it because they are looking to earn 20 credits by the time they graduate high school, so then they can go to URI. But the teacher who teaches that has to have code.org certification. That, I don't see that in there. That's what we're talking about. That is over and above any other RIDE certification, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I guess I'm just not sure how this new process impacts what you're saying. I understand that the certifications.
So if I have a teacher, let's say, who is the only teacher, and I agree with Brian, what Brian said, you don't want to have the program resting on one teacher's back either. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to give these opportunities out to multiple teachers. We do want multiple teachers trained in all these different programs, so we're not stuck sometimes, because we understand layoffs happen and things happen.
Right.
But right now, because we just started off and these programs have just gone off the ground, we have very limited teachers that are trained, and they happen to be the least senior teachers in some cases. So that's where our fear is. So what we were asking is just to kind of have a little seat on the table, maybe, perhaps with Mary Varden and the union, so we can kind of explain some of the scenarios and some of the concern. And if we can work something out that works out perfectly so that we don't lose the programs for the students, as well as carry out this vision that you already have, that's what we're asking for, if that makes any sense.
So I just want to note that I pulled up the North Kingstown website again. They also follow the Project Lead the Way curriculum for engineering.
Yeah, I guess I'm just not hearing how this new policy impacts.
From a legal process standpoint, the MOA, if it's in a collective bargaining agreement, that MOA, that trumps a school policy. So essentially, we are looking at changing the policy to refer to this proposed MOA, which then has to be further discussed and voted on by the union. If they then change the language within the MOA, which they can do based on feedback from administrators or within the education community, they can change the language in that MOA, and our policy still is good.
That's a really important point that you're making.
we are changing the policy so that it reflects the MOA language, which then needs to be voted on in the future, and they have the time, if they want to, get feedback. But I just thought it was important to note that the North Kingstown CTE program follows that Project Lead the Way curriculum for all their engineering CTEs. So that makes me feel a little better about that very specific qualification.
I just don't know what harm it would do to let
a couple of weeks pass?
No, not a couple of weeks.
It's going to take that long to get all of the people.
I'm not sure why it would take a couple weeks to have that question answered, and it looks like they're having some discussion now. Maybe we should give them a minute.
Can you use it? All right, we still technically have a quorum, but I think we should wait for, okay, Brian's back.
Yeah, so again, and Rob, feel free to join me if you like. I think we've just both agreed that, Part B, like I said before, where it says the description of the position requirements, you could write in there that you have to have that certain requirement for that position. I mean, that's...
As long as that's specified in the vacancy posting, you know what I mean, that specific requirement would be so we can run the program, then I'd be fine with that. I just think that, like, not having seen this and knowing it was like tonight, you know what I mean, it was important for me to kind of get that clarification, which I think Brian and I just kind of figured out. So as long as we have that, I think as long as that's shown in the vacancy posting that programs we can preserve that require specific things, as long as we can do that, then I think we're fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Look at this communication.
I know.
Thanks, guys.
Okay. Any further comment at the table?
We have to wait for Michelle.
Oh, we have to wait for Michelle.
Sorry.
Did she go to the restroom? I didn't see her leave. Okay. Oh, here she is. Yeah. So while we were taking a little bit of a break, Brian was discussing with Mr. Mezzanotte and Ms. Finkelstein, that item B just essentially means that it needs to be written into the job the vacancy description. And there was a level of comfort with it.
Rob felt reassured. I don't know if you guys could redo that
I know.
together moment, but
let's hear it straight from the source.
So basically, what we just determined was as long as we both understand fully, clearly, that with a position that there's a vacancy for, that the posting indicates that there is a specific like specialty requirement, if that's indeed what is needed to run a program, as long as that is like placed as a criteria within the vacancy posting, then I think we are on the same page here. I think that was something that was not clear to me. I know, not having read this, very. Having received this pretty recently, was not clear to me. That's why we're having the discussion we're having. But just having spoken to Brian, having had understanding now, I think we're good moving forward. As long as that's clear in the vacancy posting that specialty positions, are written in, that are required to run programs. So, okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you guys so much.
Okay, so is there any more discussion at the table? Okay. So the first motion would be in order to suspend typical policy process due to a new MOA being in the best interest of the district, which is in bylaws 9.3. Anyone want to make that motion? Is there a second? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Okay. So that motion passes 4-2, with Sarah Markey recused. So then the next, and I just really want to follow this very closely, because Andrew was specific in his guidance. So the next motion would have to do with suspending, to suspend policy 5425 as it applies to A, new positions, and B, voluntary transfers.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, so that motion passes 5-1 with Sarah Markey recused. And then the next motion would be to vote on the MOA that was also posted in board docs. So that's the specific, like that Article 5, vacancies, transfers, and promotions. Okay. Is there a second?
For clarification, putting it into the contract.
Right. And then from there, the union actually still has to vote on the specifics of the MOA, but it's essentially the language from that Article 5. Is there a motion at the table?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, so that motion passes 4-2 with Sarah Markey recused. Okay. Moving on. Does anyone need to take like a 5-minute recess or anything? We're good. Yeah, I know. Okay, so that takes us to item E, revision to policy 5141, medication policy. This is just the second reading and adoption. Is there a motion at the table to?
Make a motion to
approve. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so that motion passes 6-0-1, I guess, because Kate's not at the table. Okay, 600, okay. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is a discussion on building and district leadership. Dr. Stringfellow, do you want to? Everyone looks so tired.
So as I mentioned in the last item, the part of the I'm sorry, I lost it now. The part of the personnel assignment team policy that had to do with administrators was option A, like part A. So I don't know. What I was going to say is that I would like your permission tomorrow to start putting together interview teams and vacancies for the positions that we have that remain in the administrative group. We've gotten feedback from parents, and we are concerned. We'd like to get these filled. But I can't fill them with Article 5. So I guess I'll check with Andrew in the morning to figure out how I fill them.
So is it better than to wait? Because I think that, whatever recommendations like you bring to the committee, I recognize that it might take a little bit more time now to look at sort of like your vision, what might make sense as far as openings that we have as far as district leadership and the new policy. But I just think that to the point that you made, we want to make decisions sooner than later about building especially level leadership. And I think for my interest is as much as possible to really promote and hire from within when we can, when folks are appropriately certified. Okay.
I agree with that. I think it's always best to take, it's like a feeding, and when you have teachers that are able to move into administrator roles, they're invested in the district and familiar with the district, and I think that's been past practice, and I think that's great to continue with that. So I'd agree with that.
Sorry, just because when we were setting the agenda, I know there was an idea about what your vision.
I do have an idea, but I'm afraid to say it out loud because some of it involves things that don't exist anymore. So I need
that's what I was wondering,
time to understand.
And now it's not appropriate. Okay.
Because when you spoke about it before, I thought that the language was replacing B, voluntary transfers, not A, new positions. And I didn't know that it was taking away. So this was created for administrators, teacher assistants, and teachers, and it was just changed for teachers. But there isn't a part of it now that says anything about administrators. So I have to talk to Andrew or some human being who can explain it to me so that I can figure out what the process is now, because there doesn't seem to be a process other than saying to people who exist now. So, for example, we have no one for the ESL DLI coordinator who is in our ranks, and to my knowledge. If you're out there, raise your hands and come forward. But to my knowledge, no administrator or teacher has that certification. There is now not a process that lays out what will happen. It used to say an interview committee consisting of representatives from administration, staff, and other individuals, etc., and this is the criteria, and this is what we do. So I can't say to people who don't now exist, are you highly effective? Have you been in the position for 3 or more years? So I've got to wrap my head around that, but I'll get back to you.
So we can just move on to the next item, because
that would be good.
Okay. So under budget for adjustments after town council vote.
Okay, so you have to actually vote your budget tonight, and you made all the work, if you will, the last time. So on board docs somewhere, it says that you had an approved budget in the amount of $61,797,342. $797,342. And then you, based upon the reduction of vote by the town council, you reduced elementary Spanish teacher, ESL, etc. It's all up on board docs, for a total reduction of $405,517. So what you need tonight, unless there's a change that you're planning, is someone to make a motion that you adjust your budget in the amount of $61,391,825.
Okay, I'm sorry. I know this is really hard, and I know, like, we've cut so much, right? And it's hard because every position is so, like, you can argue for it. We're not heavy in admin or teachers or support staff. But I did get a lot of emails recently about the West Kingston clerk, and it just put off a little bit of an alarm for me. And I know we're at the very end here. We're ready to sort of approve the budget and move on. I just want to, I need to understand the rationale for, I think that ended up on the last sort of additional cut list from admin.
That was, I checked, that was on the very first presentation that we got, like January 8th.
I think that school needs all this.
I'm not saying it isn't. I'm just saying this was not a new element of discussion. It was on the very first slide because I checked today.
It was the first position.
But
So we didn't approve it.
No.
Right,
No,
okay.
but it was on that first, it was on that first list of
As an
suggestions
option.
that came from the administrative team.
It was an option.
Could we just maybe have, because I got a lot of feedback about that this weekend as well, just maybe some feedback as to...
So you have to pick something else. So it,
No,
in
I'm
the
not saying
amount
we
of
shouldn't. I'm just
60,000.
saying it, well, if you felt comfortable with, or not comfortable, that's a bad term. I don't want to
I
say
know,
comfortable.
yeah,
I'm
that's
sorry.
where it's
None of
tricky.
it's comfortable. If that was a recommendation, it was a recommendation, an initial recommendation, is there a plan for that office? Is there...
So your direction was to make certain that there's been so many iterations of this that the original plans were not realized. So your direction of late was to ensure that the folks that were cut were not directly teaching kids. And so that's one of the pieces that this came from. There was pushback about the Broad Rock clerk, if you remember, and then there was talk about the Curtis Corner clerk. You had already cut the clerk at the two smaller elementary schools, and then the options on the table for you, if I'm remembering correctly, was the West Kingston clerk, the Curtis Corner clerk, the Broad Rock clerk, another clerk at the high school, if you were even to go down that road of clerk.
Well, could we say clerk and then have your team decide where it makes sense, or if it's split between two buildings? I mean, I think that's where the problem's
At
coming.
this point in
We're not
the game, we've got a couple of teachers that Ms. Markey has said, teachers to be determined. That in and of itself is sort of pitting one building against the other, where principals are like, not my building. And you heard the feedback from individual principals. Everyone dearly loves their clerk, their administrative secretary, their assistant principal. It gets very difficult if you're not telling us specifically where at this end of the game.
So what if we were to just totally switch it up and go for something that...
you could.
Like, what?
Like whatever you would like it to be.
Well, I mean, why put it out there if it's not going to be supported, I guess. But like the athletics budget, it's like something that isn't as, I don't know, tied to student safety and stuff.
I guess this is hard because they're all like, I mean, every one of these positions like sort of tugs on your heartstrings, and also like you know how important folks are to the health of a school. Maybe it's as simple as like, again, like trying to prioritize this position if there are recalls based on, you know, people leaving, retiring. Maybe that's the most we can do at this point, but is to prioritize that clerk position with a few of the others that we have for recall if we get to a point that we can.
I also feel confident about the student safety at all the buildings, that this summer the safety vestibules are going to be built, so that's going to add another layer of safety. So, we it sounded from our meeting with RGB and so forth that was in a possibility. So that's not being postponed. That's what it sounded like to me in that meeting. Okay. So that's an added layer. I just don't think we should right now start revisiting the list. I really don't think it's a great idea.
Well, to follow up with the safety, we have a district crisis team that meets. They have plans for every school. They evaluate every school, and I would like to think that our administrators and recommendations that came to us have been vetted before it came to our table, so I'm comfortable with what we have right now.
Any further discussion at the table on the adjustments? Okay, so we need to vote to approve. Is there...
Motion to approve the budget in the amount of $61,391,825. Comiskey. Markey.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so that motion carries 7-0-0. Next item on the agenda is resolutions.
So I think you have three. You have three. And I think, Michelle, did you give us all three? So the first one is a resolution on financial literacy. Do you want me to read it, or have you already read it? Okay.
The three resolutions that I have asked Mary Ellen to put on the agenda came through RIASC or from other districts that they had passed them, and in the next agenda item I can give more details on, not on these resolutions specifically, but on a lot of stuff that went on at Saturday's RIASC meeting. So this is a proposal, anybody that wants them, one of the things that's backing it up is 36 other states have personal financial education in the public schools. So.
Well, I was wondering if we could if I could make a motion to approve all three of the resolutions.
Well, I love you.
Yeah, I'm watching the time. Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so that motion passes 7-0. That was a good one. Thank you. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is subcommittee reports. Do we go down the list for sure?
I think if anyone has
offer,
anything to report, they should just...
Sarah, do you want to speak to the DLI?
I just have a question on that first. Number 5 and number 13, I assume, are the same thing, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah. I'll have Mary Ellen get rid of that.
Okay. Just that we just approved the consent agenda charges and some criteria around having a representative committee, and so I'll work with Mary Ellen this week to put out a volunteer request for folks that want to join the committee, and hopefully through a doodle poll we should be able to meet.
Would you mind sending that also to Mary Ellen? Won't be in this week,
that's right.
So we'll have to find somebody else to send it out to a doodle poll, if that's okay with you.
I'll send it to
just
both
be
of you.
mindful of that. We don't want your email just laying.
Yeah, perfect. Okay.
Do you have a goal distribution of this many people that are current DLI parents, this many that are monolingual? Is there kind of a...
Yeah, I think that I don't have a goal in number of people, just that it's reflective, right? That we have both some DLI parents from both schools and also non-DLI parents maybe from both elementary schools and throughout, and ideally even staff, teachers, and community members. And so I think it's less for me about a total number, more about the makeup being fairly representative. But I didn't have like a goal in mind unless folks have an idea. I suspect we're going to get a lot of volunteers, and we won't be able to take everyone. Otherwise, it won't be representative.
Anything else?
So, Ms. Kaminsky and I are going to meet it's in my calendar, to discuss the Augusta hazard. So I will come to the school committee with recommendations in Dr. Stringfellow the May meeting. We do that, right? I believe so. Okay. The other thing, sorry, give me a second. I lost my agenda item. On the legislation, I have not. I typically every weekend, because I have such an exciting life, reach out to all of the reps and the senators and just say, what do you have? Well, this particular weekend, because I have such an exciting life, I have, I think, 10 pages of notes from the RIASC meeting. So I'll summarize it in a couple of sentences. Representative Amore from East Providence and Senator Pearson presented to RIASC on Saturday. I'm going to organize my notes and request that I be allowed to come back with these notes, because it gave me, Senator Pearson gave me a much better understanding of the funding formula and some details. But I took all these notes on Saturday, and the job that pays my mortgage interfered in the meantime. One of the things that Rep. Amore kept coming back to was the whole idea of the statewide curriculum, and he gave some details which, in my opinion, reassured me. He said the General Assembly has presented several things, and as he went through, he would say, this was presented to Rhode as like a request, and it was presented again, and it was presented again, and it was never acted on. So these were requests that were made from various senators and reps to Rhode to enact, because as school committee members know, Rhode policy has the impact of state statute. And it was, I have concerns about a lot of things being legislated, but I got a better understanding on Saturday about the fact they ask Rhode, Rhode does nothing, so then they say, okay, we're going to legislate it. So the idea of the statewide curriculum, where it's the way it's being worked on right now, according to Rep. Amore, is that they're going to provide people with a framework, and it's going to be aligned to Common Core and RICAS. And if you have a curriculum in place that works, that aligns, you get to keep it. One of the things that he said was that the transiency in public schools in Rhode Island is at the highest rate ever. I don't know as we see a lot of that here, but, okay. And as far as, statewide curriculum, I can only give you, the math teacher walked in the room. The last I knew, when I was involved in high school curriculum, they did a survey statewide, and there are, I believe, 33 districts, because there were some of the regional, 33 or 34 districts. There were 27 different definitions of Algebra 1. I have 27 pages of bills that I need to read next weekend, so I may be coming back to you with more resolutions next month. Mr. Duffy made a big deal about the resolution that we just passed on the amendment to Article 11, making education a constitutional right. There's work between the General Assembly and DCYF with regard to placement of students in like group homes to try to get them closer to their home district so that that's not an issue. The other thing that I think has come up at this table is the contract continuation and binding arbitration. And so I would recommend that we kind of hold on that, because it seems that RIASC, the unions, and the General Assemblies are kind of trying to work together on something that everybody can live with. RIASC has traditionally not supported contract continuation, but and I'm going to kind of try to get Mr. Duffy and get some more details on this, but it seems like they seem to be talking about that.
Michelle, wouldn't it be beneficial then for us to, because I think last time when we talked about contract continuation, the idea was to come back and vote on a resolution that supported it. Wouldn't that be helpful since all sides are talking?
Yes, but I'd like to stall just a little bit, and I mean, like, when I say stall, I don't mean until June. I mean, like, perhaps more will come out next month, that we could have a resolution that would specifically support what they're doing.
I just want to offer a shout out to Michelle for having like that much to say at 10:40 and keeping it all together and like sensical.
4:30 this morning.
Me too. I'm struggling right now. I'm hungry. Kate, you have wellness and physical.
I'm hungry too. Yes, I will eat at this hour when I get home. So the Transportation Subcommittee, and normally I'd be like, let's pass it to the next one, but it's a big chunk of our budget, so I want to make sure that it gets on record. So Marianne has been nice enough to give me bullet points. So there's some things that we're looking at as recommendations to explore. No promises, but we're looking at them. The concept of depot stops, reassessing door-to-door pickup stops, opting in or out of our transportation, increasing walking distances, and comparing SK costs per pupil transportation costs to other districts. We have a question and answer that we've put together. It's more or less done, that we're going to put out. We're going to review it one more time before it comes in front of the committee to decide if we're going to put it out to the public, which will help with a lot of transportation confusion, I think. But as long as we can look into and explore the bulleted points, hopefully we can find some cost savings that we haven't been able to realize in the past.
So now I just want to say, Kate, I'm super grateful for all the work you do on the subcommittees, like the Wellness Committee, Transportation Committee. You put a lot of time in, and should be recognized for it.
And is it every professional development training? So, thank you. Any other committee updates? Okay. So then we can go to final comments from committee members. If there's anything left unsaid, Alicia, do you want to start?
I don't know, kudos to everyone for all of your hard work and like patience with each other and stuff. That's all I have to say tonight.
Okay. Michelle?
Done.
You're done. Sarah?
I just want to, so I've done a lot of school visits. I'm sorry, I'll be fast. Gee. No, but I did a school visit to Peacedale on Friday, and I just thought it was worth like mentioning, because the staff, the administration, everyone was so welcoming, and it was just really cool to see Much like when I went to Curse Corner, the high school, West Kingston, it was great to see hands-on what's happening in the schools, and everyone was just really, really welcoming. So I wanted to give a shout out to Peacedale. And also,
Did you get your picture taken in front of the wings? Oh. I have nothing to say other than I'll see you guys next week. Monday, Tuesday.
Good meeting, lots of good stuff getting done. Great job to all, and good night.
Thank you guys very much. I know this was tough, working through some tough conversations, but is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Yes. Is there a second? I'll second. All in favor? Aye. Okay. So meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everybody who stayed so late.